What if I told you that advertising, um, which is often thought of as like the ultimate creative gamble, isn't actually a gamble at all?
I mean, that completely shatters the whole mythology we have, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like we have this idea of the madman genius pulling a brilliant slogan out of thin air, absolute guesswork, but with artistic flair.
Oh, totally.
Yeah,
We have this romanticized vision of commerce where a single spark of creative inspiration just changes the world overnight.
right. But what if it's an exact science, governed by laws as immutable as the law of gravity?
Well, the reality of how modern business was built and how it actually functions today is far more clinical than the romantic version.
Oh, for sure.
The foundation of everything we buy, how we're sold to, and how successful businesses scale is built on this realization that human behavior, when you measure it at scale, is ruthlessly predictable.
And, that realization didn't just happen yesterday with the invention of the social media algorithm.
Not at all.
It happened over a century ago. So in this deep dive, we are opening up Chapter 1 of Claude Hopkins' foundational text, Scientific Advertising.
Such an incredible book.
It really is. The ideas laid out in this brief chapter basically transformed the entire landscape of commerce, like taking it from a terrifying game of roulette into a predictable, measurable machine.
Right, and understanding these established laws that Hopkins documented, it's not just a history lesson for you.
Definitely not.
It is the absolute bedrock for anyone trying to build a business, launch a product, or honestly, just figure out why you suddenly feel the urge to buy something you saw on a screen.
Yeah, our mission today is really to extract those timeless principles from this first chapter, to prove that business success isn't just an accident.
It's an outcome of tested methodology.
Exactly. So Hopkins wrote this in the 1920s, which is wild to think about.
Yeah, a time when the stakes for businesses were just incredibly high and the methods were, frankly, totally reckless.
Like they were basically throwing money into the dark and just hoping to hit a target.
Right. And his core thesis, right out of the gate, is this stark declaration. The era of guessing is over.
Wow. He really just came right out and said it.
He did. He states that advertising has reached the status of a science. The causes and effects have been analyzed until they are completely understood.
I mean, the text makes a claim that almost sounds absurd on his face. Right?
Oh, absolutely.
He writes that under able direction, no other enterprise with comparable possibilities need involve so little risk.
Think about that for a second.
I know. Starting a business, trying to get people to part with their hard-earned money, that is universally considered one of the riskiest things a person can do.
Yeah, most new ventures fail. Everyone knows that.
Right. Yet Hopkins is standing there in the 1920s saying, no, if you actually follow the laws of this science, it's one of the safest ventures on Earth.
And I think the audacity of that claim is really what makes this text so revolutionary.
Oh, for sure.
Before the scientific approach took hold, a business owner putting an ad in a national newspaper was basically performing an act of blind faith.
Just crossing their fingers.
Exactly. They would, buy the space, hire an artist to draw a pretty picture, have a writer invent a clever pun, and then just wait to see if the factory orders went up.
And if they didn't?
The business owner had no idea why. Was the picture wrong? Was the price too high? Did people even see the paper?
Right, they were flying completely blind.
Exactly. And Hopkins introduces the radical concept that this blindness is entirely optional.
Okay, wait, let me push back on this premise right away, because I'm imagining someone listening to this who, say, works in creative marketing.
Oh, sure. The creatives always hate this part.
Right. Or even just someone who watched the Super Bowl commercials last year. Millions of dollars are spent on pure spectacle.
Oh, yeah. Celebrity cameos, cinematic storytelling, emotional music.
Exactly. So if advertising is a strict, measurable science, how do we explain this massive industry of, like, brand awareness and creative intuition?
It's a great question.
Like, doesn't calling it a science completely kill the art of it? How do you map out human idiosyncrasies, human fads, and changing tastes like it's a physics equation?
So that is the exact friction point most people hit when they first encounter this philosophy.
It feels reductive, right, to say human desire is just a math problem.
It does. But Hopkins anticipates this perfectly. He draws a very sharp, crucial line between predicting what people will want and predicting the method of selling it to them.
Oh, interesting. So the method is what's scientific.
Exactly. He explicitly acknowledges that human preferences and prejudices are really hard to measure.
Okay, that makes me feel a bit better.
Right. Like, we can't say with absolute certainty that a new flavor of soda or a new style of shoe will naturally capture the public's imagination.
Because people are weird and fickle.
Exactly. Human unpredictability absolutely exists at the product level.
Okay, so the science isn't some crystal ball that tells you to invent the iPhone before anyone else thought of it.
Precisely. The science doesn't invent the desire. The science is the vehicle that delivers the offer.
I like that, the vehicle.
Hopkins says, now the only uncertainties pertain to people and to products, not to methods.
Right.
Let's say you invent a completely new type of vacuum cleaner. You don't know for sure if the public wants a new vacuum.
Right, maybe they're happy with their brooms.
Exactly. But the scientific advertiser knows the absolute best, most rigorously tested method to present that vacuum to the public.
Okay, I see.
They know exactly how to structure the headline, how to present the price, and how to ask for the sale to give that vacuum its absolute highest possible chance of succeeding.
So, if the vacuum cleaner totally fails and nobody buys it, Hopkins would argue it wasn't the advertising that failed.
Nope. It was just a bad product.
Wow, and that is where the risk reduction comes in, isn't it?
Exactly. If you use scientific methods, you find out very quickly and very cheaply if your product is a dud.
Right, so you don't spend 5 years and $10 million trying to convince people to buy something they don't want.
Just because some creative genius told you the campaign just needed more time to breathe.
Oh, man. Yeah, the science gives you an immediate, definitive answer.
Right. The failures, as Hopkins puts it, become trifling.
Trifling, I love that word.
Yeah, they are small, cheap experiments that tell you to pivot, rather than these massive disasters that bankrupt the whole company.
That distinction makes complete sense. And the text uses a really good analogy here, which I think is great. He compares operating without these established laws to a man trying to build a modern locomotive without first ascertaining what others had done.
Let's really visualize the absurdity of that locomotive analogy for a second.
Okay, let's do it.
Imagine deciding you want to build a high-speed train today. You walk into an empty warehouse with a pile of iron ore.
Just a pile of rocks, essentially.
Right. You don't look at any blueprints, you don't study thermodynamics or metallurgy.
You just start hammering metal.
Hoping you can invent the steam engine, the brake system, and the wheels purely by trial and error.
I mean, you would spend a lifetime making mistakes that were solved a century ago.
It's pure ego. You'd blow up the warehouse trying to figure out boiler pressure.
Yeah, you'd be dead before you even got the wheels off.
Exactly. But that is precisely how most people approach business and marketing when they rely purely on their own intuition.
Wow. That's a huge blind spot.
It is. Hopkins argues that in the past, advertising workers were basically a law unto themselves. All previous knowledge was just a closed book.
So they were starting from scratch every single time they sat down to write an ad.
Every single time.
He brings in Columbus, too, which I think paints the picture even better.
Oh, the Columbus analogy is brilliant.
Yeah, he says early advertisers were like Columbus starting out to find an undiscovered land, guided only by whims and fancies, vagrant, changing breezes.
Poetic, but a terrible way to run a business.
Right. They rarely arrived at their destination. When they did, it was by pure accident.
The mariner metaphor is incredibly powerful if you understand navigation before the modern era.
Right, before GPS.
Long before GPS, before these advertising laws were established, every person trying to sell something was mapping their own separate course in the dark.
Just sailing out into the abyss.
Hopkins writes, "Not a lighthouse marked a harbor, not a buoy showed a reef."
Wow.
Because previous business failures weren't recorded and shared, countless ventures crashed their ships on the exact same rocks.
Over and over again. One person's guess was as good as another's.
Imagine putting your entire livelihood into a ship, sailing into the fog, and hitting a reef that 100 other ships hit yesterday.
But no one bothered to put up a warning sign.
Exactly. That was business before this era.
But Hopkins is saying the map has been drawn now. The reefs are marked.
The lighthouses are built. The course is finally charted.
Which means ignoring the map is no longer just brave. It's practically negligent.
Totally negligent. The speculation has become a conservative business. He says it is no longer a proper field for sophistry or theory.
If you are guided by these immutable laws, maximum success becomes possible.
And if you ignore them, you are almost guaranteed to sink.
So, practically speaking, if you're sitting there listening to this and you're trying to get traction on a new project, maybe you're a freelancer trying to get clients, or you're running a tech startup, you have to stop trying to sail without a map.
Please stop throwing random ideas at the wall just to see what sticks.
Yes.
Yes.
You have to treat your ventures as measurable experiments governed by established laws.
And that naturally leads to a massive question, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. If these immutable laws exist, if the map is real and the roofs are marked, who actually drew the map?
Right. How did this knowledge get aggregated in an era long before computers and big data?
Yes. Who built the lighthouses? And this brings us to the actual laboratories where this science was forged. The second key idea, the advertising agency as a scientific clearinghouse.
This part is so fascinating. Hopkins points out that the elevated scientific status of commerce wasn't achieved by a single solitary genius working alone in a basement.
It wasn't just Hopkins himself.
No, not at all. It was due to the rise of large organizations known as advertising agencies.
Okay, but we need to strip away the modern glossy image of an ad agency, right?
Yeah.
Like the Mad Men corner offices with the scotch.
Exactly. We have to look at what they functionally were in the early 20th century. They were basically massive data processing centers built on paper and ink.
Wow. They were handling hundreds of national campaigns simultaneously.
And the crucial element wasn't just that they were busy, it was what they did with the results of all that activity.
Right. Hopkins says the results have been watched and recorded, so no lessons have been lost.
They took the brightest minds, put them in a room, and had them test thousands of different plans.
Thousands.
And the concept of institutional memory here is absolutely vital.
What do you mean by that?
Well, individuals in these agencies might come and go. A brilliant copywriter might retire or move to another city.
Okay.
But their recorded data stayed in the filing cabinets. The agency itself became this storehouse of proven principles.
Oh, I see. So when a new person was hired, they didn't have to guess how to write a headline.
Exactly. They could literally open a drawer and look at 10 years of documented proof of what worked and what failed.
When I was reading this section, it completely blew my mind because he is describing an open source data library like a century before the internet.
It really is. These agencies were essentially crowdsourcing human buying behavior.
They were physical, analog versions of machine learning algorithms.
Yes. They fed thousands of campaigns into their system, tracked the outcomes, and built a predictive model of human psychology.
And the scale of their data collection gave them an unparalleled vantage point.
Think about it. These large agencies weren't just working in one narrow niche.
Right. They weren't just the soap agency.
Exactly. They came into intimate contact with experts across every single department of business. They represented the dominating companies in soap, sure, but also in automobiles, in food, in clothing.
They saw the inner workings, the successes, and the catastrophic failures of the entire economic spectrum.
So if a soap company figured out a brilliant new way to frame a money-back guarantee, the agency could take that core psychological principle and apply it to a company selling tires.
That's incredible.
Hopkins literally calls the agency a clearinghouse for merchandising.
A clearinghouse. Because they sat at the center of this massive web of commerce.
Right. So nearly every selling question that could possibly arise had already been answered by someone else's money.
Oh, I love that phrase. Answered by someone else's money.
It's the best way to learn. If a new client came in with a problem, the agency didn't need to brainstorm a theoretical solution.
Right. They could just pull out the data from a similar situation 3 years ago and say, here is the mathematically proven answer.
The compass of accurate knowledge directed them on the shortest, safest, and cheapest course.
The relief that must have provided to business owners is just hard to overstate.
Oh, it must have been a lifesaver. You do not have to reinvent the wheel.
Yeah, if you are struggling with a sales problem today, you don't need to isolate yourself in a room and hope for a stroke of genius.
Someone else has already faced your exact problem, tested 10 different solutions, and recorded the single most efficient way to solve it.
Your job is just to tap into that clearinghouse of proven principles.
But, this introduces a sort of mechanical problem.
How so?
Well, we understand that the agencies acted as these massive data storehouses, but how, in a practical, physical sense, did they actually gather the data?
Oh, right. You can't just run an ad in a national newspaper and then go around asking thousands of people on the street if they liked it.
No, because people are terrible at predicting their own buying behavior.
Yeah, and they often lie about what influences them.
Right. If you ask someone why they bought a specific car, they'll give you this highly rational explanation about fuel efficiency and safety ratings.
But the real reason might be that the ad made them feel powerful.
Or successful.
Exactly. You cannot trust self-reported data. You need behavior-based data.
which requires a rigorous, unforgiving methodology.
And that methodology was perfected in one specific arena of commerce. Which brings us to our third key idea. If you want to know where the absolute bedrock of advertising science was poured, you have to look at the mail order business.
Hopkins identifies this as the ultimate proving ground.
Mail order. Like the Sears Roebuck catalogs.
Yes.
The ads in the back of magazines selling everything from sewing machines to encyclopedias.
Hopkins rates that principles are proved by repeated tests. And in mail order, everything is traced down to the fraction of a penny.
The environment of mail order in the 1920s was brutal and beautiful in its simplicity. Let's contrast it with a general branding campaign, just to give a clearer picture.
Okay, let's do it.
Imagine you are a major automobile manufacturer in 1925.
Okay.
You buy a massive billboard in Times Square. Over the next month, your sales in New York go up by 5%. Can you definitively prove the billboard caused that?
Not at all. Maybe the weather got nicer and people just wanted to drive.
Right. Or maybe your competitor had a factory strike and couldn't produce enough cars.
Or maybe the local dealerships just ran a really good local promotion. The attribution is a complete mess.
Exactly. You can't draw a straight, uncorrupted line from the money you spent on the billboard to the money you made in the dealership.
General branding has an incredibly muddy feedback loop.
But mail order allows for what Hopkins calls utter exactness.
Utter exactness. Because in a mail order campaign, the advertisement is not just a reminder or a brand builder.
Right. The advertisement is the entire salesperson.
There is no store display to catch the eye. There's no charismatic salesman to smooth over objections.
The ad has to do the entire job.
Yeah.
It has to capture attention, make the pitch, overcome doubt, and convince the reader to physically mail away their cash.
And if the ad doesn't work, the mailbag is empty.
But if it does work, the mailbag is full of money. It is a completely binary, instantaneous feedback loop.
There is zero ambiguity.
Right. And because the margins in mail order were incredibly tight and the scale was massive, guesswork was strictly prohibited.
Hopkins points out that reducing the cost of acquiring a customer by even 1% meant the difference between a thriving empire and bankruptcy.
Wow. When the stakes are that high, you don't let the copywriter write a clever poem just because it sounds nice.
No, you test it.
You compare one ad with another. You run one headline on Monday and a different headline on Tuesday.
You test the size of the font. You test the pictures.
You test the specific arguments backward and forward. And because the mail either comes or it doesn't, false theories just melt away.
I mean, you can't argue with an empty mailbox.
You really can't. This is why Hopkins asserts that mail order advertising was the laboratory that established our basic advertising laws.
It stripped away all the vanity and ego of the creative process and subjected every idea to the ultimate crucible. Did it make people pull out their wallets, or didn't it?
I think this is such a critical concept for anyone building anything today. We get so lost in the noise of subjective feedback.
Oh, tell me about it. My friends think this is a great idea.
My followers on social media like the design.
Right, but none of that matters if the environment doesn't offer undeniable behavioral feedback.
Exactly. If you're launching a product, you need to construct your own version of the mail order crucible.
You need an environment where the results are trackable and undeniable.
Because if you can't measure the exact action your idea produces, you cannot refine it scientifically.
But even within that mail order crucible, we have to look closely at the specific instruments they used.
How so?
Well, how did they actually trace those returns? When you're running ads in 50 different magazines across the country, how do you know which magazine the customer was reading when they decided to buy?
Oh, that brings us to the mechanics of the tracking itself. The fourth key idea, the physical instruments of the science.
Key to advertising, coupons, and the concept of the cost per customer.
When direct pure mail order wasn't the exact model, say you were selling a product that had to be bought in a local store, advertisers had to get highly creative with their tracking.
Hopkins notes that sometimes they would use geographic isolation.
Like running one method in town A and a completely different method in town B.
Exactly. Then they would measure the cost of sales in those respective towns.
It's a massive, real-world split test.
It is. But the most common and arguably the most revolutionary tool they deployed across the board was the physical coupon.
Okay, explain how that worked.
The text explains that advertisers would embed a coupon in the corner of the newspaper ad. They would offer a sample, a small book, a free trial package.
Something of tangible value, right?
Right, to induce the reader to literally cut out the coupon and mail it in.
And here is the genius part of the mechanics. They would key the coupons.
Yes, the keys.
So if you ran an ad in McClure's magazine, the coupon would say, mail this to Department 14.
And if you ran the exact same ad in Cosmopolitan, the coupon would say, mail this to Department 15.
But there was no Department 14 or 15.
None. It was just a code.
So when the mail arrived at the agency, they simply looked at the address on the envelope and knew instantly, with 100% certainty, which magazine had generated that lead.
It is the physical analog ancestor of the digital tracking link.
They were doing UTM parameters and tracking pixels with scissors and envelopes.
Exactly. And this allowed them to measure the exact amount of action each specific ad in each specific publication engendered.
But let me jump in here, because Hopkins introduces a layer of nuance to this coupon strategy that I think is the most brilliant psychological insight in the entire chapter.
Oh, I know exactly what you're going to say.
He warns the reader that simply counting the sheer volume of coupons you get back in the mail is not the final metric.
This is where Hopkins moves from being a mere statistician to a master of human psychology.
Yes.
He recognized a massive trap that advertisers fall into, optimizing for engagement rather than optimizing for revenue.
Right. He points out that one ad might bring in an absolute avalanche of replies. The mailroom is overflowing.
But upon closer inspection, those replies are worthless.
Because the ad was too flashy, or the offer for the free sample was just too broad.
Precisely.
Yeah.
If your ad practically begs people to take a free item without qualifying them, you will attract an army of freebie seekers.
People who just love getting mail and love free things.
Exactly. People who have absolutely zero intention of ever paying for your actual product.
So the ad was incredibly successful at generating action.
But it was a catastrophic failure at generating a customer.
Meanwhile, a different ad, maybe one that is a bit longer, more serious, and requires the reader to genuinely care about the problem the product solves, might bring in only a fraction of the coupons.
Right. But the people who send in those coupons are highly qualified.
They actually read the copy. They actually have the problem.
And they eventually become loyal, paying customer.
Therefore, Hopkins lays down this absolute ironclad rule.
Yeah.
Final conclusions must always be based on cost per customer or cost per dollar of sale.
You do not measure the cost per reply. You do not measure the cost per inquiry.
You measure the actual finalized cost of acquiring a paying customer.
It's astounding how applicable this is to the modern digital landscape, honestly.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
We have access to more data than Hopkins could have ever dreamed of, yet businesses constantly fall into the exact trap he warned about a century ago.
We optimize for what we now call vanity metrics.
Yeah, it's the modern equivalent of the worthless reply.
A company will celebrate because a quirky video they posted went viral and got 5 million views and 100,000 likes.
They pop the champagne. They think the marketing was a massive success.
But if those 5 million viewers were just entertained by the joke and had no real interest in the underlying product?
The business just spent time and money acquiring worthless attention.
Exactly. The cost per engagement was incredibly low, but the cost per actual customer might be astronomically high.
Or look at modern performance marketing on platforms like Facebook or Google.
Oh, yeah.
The platforms will gladly optimize your campaigns for clicks. They will find you the people on the internet who are most likely to click on anything they see.
The chronic clickers.
Yes. Your cost per click drops to pennies. You feel like a genius, but your sales don't move because chronic clickers aren't necessarily buyers.
Right. You have to train the system, just like Hopkins trained his agencies, to optimize for the conversion, the actual cost per acquisition of a paying customer.
Through this rigorous method of keyed coupons, tracing returns down to the penny, and filtering out the freebie seekers, these large ad agencies built an unassailable mountain of data.
As Hopkins writes, coupon returns were watched and recorded on hundreds of different product lines.
For a single line of business, they might record the outcomes of thousands of separate, individual ads.
Thus, we test everything pertaining to advertising, he notes. We answer nearly every possible question by multitudinous traced returns.
I just love that phrase, multitudinous traced return.
It sounds so incredibly authoritative.
You can't argue with multitudinous traced returns.
You really can't. It is the ultimate triumph of empiricism over opinion.
And Hopkins makes a final, vital point about this data before we wrap up.
Right. He notes that while some of the things they learned applied only to particular lines of business, say, a specific tactic that worked for selling tractors but not for selling perfume. Other principles proved universally true.
They applied to human nature across the board, regardless of the product.
These universal truths became the fundamental laws. And he gives a stark warning. No wise advertiser will ever depart from those unvarying laws.
So synthesizing everything we've unpacked from this first chapter, the core philosophy is just a total paradigm shift.
It really is.
True business strategy isn't about crossing your fingers and hoping for a stroke of creative genius.
No, it isn't about trusting your gut feeling when millions of dollars or even just your own personal savings are on the line.
It is about operating within these mathematically verified laws of human behavior.
It's about recognizing that the ocean of commerce is dangerous, but it has been meticulously mapped by the people who sailed it before you.
By treating your venture as a science, measuring your results, tracking your costs down to the fraction of a penny, aggressively separating vanity metrics from the true cost of acquiring a customer, and leaning on the collective, recorded data of the past, you fundamentally alter the nature of the game.
Speculation ceases to be a terrifying gamble.
It becomes a conservative, highly predictable, and deeply secure enterprise.
Absolutely.
And as we wrap up this deep dive, that realization leaves me with a lingering, almost philosophical thought. It's something for you to mull over before we get into the specifics of these laws in the next chapter.
I love a good philosophical tangent.
Think about this. If advertising is truly an exact science, mapped out by decades and now a century of meticulously recorded data on our psychological triggers, our specific reactions to specific words, and our predictable behaviors,
Yeah.
are we as consumers truly making free choices when we buy?
Oh, wow.
When you add that item to your cart or click that link or feel that sudden urge that you need this new product, was it a spontaneous act of free will?
That's heavy.
Or are you simply reacting with perfect predictability to the immutable laws of human nature that Claude Hopkins and his contemporaries cataloged 100 years ago? Are we driving the locomotive of our own desires? Or are we just following the tracks they laid down?
It's a profound, slightly unsettling question, honestly. Once you realize how completely predictable human action can be when the right psychological levers are pulled, it changes the way you view every single piece of media you interact with.
You stop seeing just the ad, and you start seeing the machinery behind it.
You see the math behind the magic.
And once you accept that these universal laws of human behavior are real and that they are being used every single day, the immediate next question becomes, what are they?
Right.
If there is an ultimate foundational law of human nature that you must adhere to when you actually step up to sell something to someone, what is it? We're going to uncover exactly what that foundational law is and how to wield it in Chapter 2.
What if everything you have ever been told about great advertising, like the catchy slogans, the hilarious commercials, those award-winning artistic designs, what if all of that is actually costing you money?
I mean, that is a terrifying thought for most marketing teams, honestly.
Right. Like, what if campaigns that go wildly viral are actually a failure? What if true advertising isn't an art form at all, but simply a salesperson in print?
It completely upends the modern marketing playbook. It really does.
It's a huge shift.
Yeah, because we are so conditioned, to view advertising as a spectacle.
Yeah.
Like it's an extension of the entertainment industry.
Oh, totally. We live in this era where the ultimate goal of a campaign often just seems to be, I don't know, getting retweets or trending on social media.
Right, or winning a Cannes Lion for creativity.
Exactly. But today's deep dive goes in the exact opposite direction. We are going back to a foundational text that strips away every single vanity metric.
And it reveals a harsh, but honestly incredibly profitable truth.
Yeah, so if you are listening to this and you have ever tried to sell anything, a physical product, a piece of software, maybe a new initiative to your board, or even just yourself in a high-stakes interview, this shift in perspective is absolutely mandatory.
Today, we're looking really closely at Chapter 2 of Claude C. Hopkins' Foundational Guide, Scientific Advertising.
Yes.
And the chapter is literally titled, Just Salesmanship.
Which kind of says it all, right?
It does. In short, we are going to explore why treating advertising strictly as a measurable, accountable salesperson Completely eliminates the disastrous guesswork that bankrupts companies.
And this matters profoundly for anyone in business, right? Because it forces a shift away from that ego-driven desire to win applause.
Exactly. It points us toward the only metric that actually keeps a business alive.
Which is making profitable sales by serving the buyer's actual interests.
Right. So the bedrock claim Hopkins makes here, the premise that sets the stage for everything else, is what we could call the identity crisis of advertising.
Okay, unpack that a little bit. What do you mean by identity crisis?
Well, he states unconditionally that advertising is only salesmanship, period.
Only salesmanship, nothing else.
Nothing else. It's not designed for, general effect. It's not meant to keep your name before the public.
Which is what everyone says they're doing. We're just getting our name out there.
Right, but Hopkins violently rejects that. Its sole, uncompromising purpose is to make a sale.
Wow.
And it must justify its existence using the exact same metrics you would use to evaluate a real human salesperson.
Okay, which introduces, let's be real, a terrifying level of accountability for the average marketing department.
Oh, absolute terror.
Yeah.
Let's look at a standard corporate environment, just as an example.
Okay, yeah.
If a company hires a human sales rep, they're given a territory, a quota, and an expense account.
Right, standard stuff.
And their performance is tracked relentlessly. If they don't bring in revenue that exceeds their base salary and expenses,
They get fired.
exactly, they are terminated. It's a harsh reality, but it's accepted as the basic law of commerce. You don't keep a salesperson who costs you more than they make.
Makes total sense.
But, and here is the massive disconnect Hopkins identifies, businesses routinely accept the excuse of building brand awareness from an ad campaign.
Even if that campaign might cost like 20 times what that human salesman costs.
Exactly.
Right. So imagine a scenario to put this in perspective. An enterprise software salesman walks into the chief revenue officer's office at the end of Q3.
Oh.
The CRO looks at the spreadsheet and says, look, you spent $150,000 on travel, dinners, and client entertainment this quarter. How much close one revenue did you bring in?
A very reasonable question.
Right. And the salesman just smiles proudly and says, well, $0. I didn't close a single deal. But I told some incredible jokes in the lobbies of these Fortune 500 companies.
Oh my God.
People loved my presentations. Everyone knows our company's name now. And I got a ton of high fives on my way out the door.
Security would be escorting him out of the building within 5 minutes.
Exactly. He'd be fired on the spot.
Yeah.
Yet, when an advertising agency or, an in-house marketing team comes back and says, hey, we spent $2 million, sales are flat, but our impressions are up 300%.
And people really like the typography.
Right. The executives just nod thoughtfully and renew the budget. It's a profound cognitive dissonance.
It really is. And we have to ask why this cognitive dissonance exists.
Okay.
Why do incredibly smart, data-driven executives suddenly lose their minds when it comes to advertising?
Right. Why do they let ads get away with murder?
It comes down to corporate incentives and the psychological comfort of vanity metrics.
Vanity metrics.
The concept of general effect advertising is psychologically safe for a marketing executive or a business owner.
Because it completely obscures failure.
Precisely. If your stated goal is simply to get your name out there, you can never truly fail.
That is so true.
The money was spent, the billboard was erected, the views were logged. You can declare success without ever having to prove that a single dollar of profit was generated.
Wow. So it protects egos and it protects jobs.
Exactly. It's the sunk cost fallacy wrapped up in a protective blanket of corporate jargon.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. But Hopkins, he just violently rejects this safety net, doesn't he?
He demands that advertising be tied to hard business math. We're talking about customer acquisition cost, or SCAC, and return on ad spend, or ROAS.
So unit economics.
Yes. If you spend $50 on an ad to acquire a customer, and the lifetime profit of that customer is $40, the ad failed.
It lost you $10.
Exactly. And it doesn't matter if 1 million people thought the ad was a cinematic masterpiece.
Right. It's an incompetent salesperson actively losing the company $10 per interaction.
Hopkins insists we strip away the romance and look at the unit economics.
Okay, but I need to challenge this premise for a second.
Go for it.
Because a human salesperson absolutely relies on charm.
Right.
Like, they take clients out to dinner, they build emotional rapport, they tell stories, they ask about the client's kids.
That's true.
If Hopkins is saying advertising is exactly like salesmanship, isn't he stripping away the very human elements, the emotion, the charm, the relationship building that make actual salespeople successful?
It's a fair question.
Like, does he really want a clinical, robotic regurgitation of facts?
That is a crucial distinction to make. Hopkins isn't saying you shouldn't understand human emotion or buying psychology. In fact, he relies on it entirely.
Okay.
But he differentiates between the interpersonal dynamic of a one-on-one relationship and the transactional nature of print or digital media.
How so?
Well, when a human salesperson asks about a client's kids, it's a genuine interactive exchange that builds a localized bond.
Right, it's a real conversation.
But when a brand tries to artificially simulate that interpersonal charm through a mass-market advertisement, it comes across as manipulative and insincere.
Oh, I see. Because the prospect knows a billboard doesn't actually care about their kids.
Exactly. So the medium dictates the method.
Okay, that makes sense.
The human salesperson uses rapport to earn the right to present the facts. The advertisement must earn that right immediately through sheer relevance.
So you skip the small talk.
You have to. Furthermore, the scale of the medium changes the math completely. A salesperson can afford to spend 3 hours building rapport over golf because they are trying to close a massive enterprise deal.
Right.
An advertisement doesn't have the luxury of time or interactivity, which leads directly into the sheer mathematics of scale that Hopkins presents next.
Right. Advertising is not just salesmanship.
No, it is multiplied salesmanship.
Multiplied salesmanship. The leverage here is almost difficult to wrap your head around, honestly.
It really is.
Because, a human is talking to one prospect at a time. An ad is talking to thousands, or in today's digital environment, potentially tens of millions of people simultaneously.
And that scale comes with corresponding, often astronomical costs. Hopkins notes that in his era, some advertisers were spending $10 per word on an average advertisement.
Wait, $10 per word back then?
Yes. To put that into historical context, a first-class postage stamp at that time was 2 cents.
Wow.
$10 a word was a staggering sum of capital. It would be the modern equivalent of paying thousands of dollars per character.
That is insane. Under that kind of financial pressure, every single syllable must justify its existence.
It fundamentally changes how you view the editing process. You aren't just tweaking a sentence to make it sound nicer.
Right, you are making $1,000 capital allocations per word.
Which creates an extreme asymmetry of risk.
Okay, explain that. Asymmetry of risk.
Think about the difference between a localized mistake and a systemic mistake.
Okay.
If a human salesperson is having an off day, maybe they misread a client, make a poorly timed joke, or fumble a product demonstration, what happens?
They lose that one account.
Exactly. It's painful, but it is a localized failure.
Yeah.
It doesn't sink the entire enterprise.
Right.
Moreover, a human can read the room.
Mm-hmm.
If they see the client frown, they can instantly pivot, apologize, and try a different angle.
But an advertisement is completely static. It can't pivot.
No, I can't.
If it makes a poorly timed joke, it makes that joke to 10 million people at once.
Exactly. It cannot read the room.
Yeah.
If an ad is mediocre, or if it actively insults the intelligence of the buyer, it is a systemic failure. It loses all trade across the entire market simultaneously.
Wow. You could be burning millions of dollars in capital on a campaign that is actively alienating your core demographic.
And the ad will just keep relentlessly executing that terrible pitch until the budget runs dry.
Because it doesn't know any better.
Right. The margin for error isn't just small. Compared to a human salesperson, it is practically non-existent.
This makes the creation and approval process of any marketing material suddenly look terrifying.
It should be terrifying.
If a salesperson's localized mistake costs a few $1,000s, but an ad's systemic mistake costs millions, we should be treating the creation of an ad campaign with the exact same severity and scrutiny that we would use to recruit and train a $1 million high-stakes employee.
Because mathematically, that is exactly what the ad is. It's a super salesman.
Like super salesman.
It demands a level of operational seriousness that most companies simply do not apply to their marketing.
Yeah.
You see marketing teams casually approving copy because it, sounds catchy.
Yeah, let's punch it up.
Right, without ever running the brutal unit economics or treating the copy like an autonomous sales agent with a massive corporate credit card.
Okay, assuming we grasp the gravity of this, that we are sending this super salesman out to talk to millions of people with millions of dollars on the line, human instinct kicks in.
Naturally.
If the stakes are that high, we want to over-engineer it. We want to bring in Shakespeare.
You'll want the best creative writers.
Exactly. Massive attention-grabbing fonts, hilarious punchlines, spectacular visual effects to ensure it doesn't fail. We want to make it an undeniable piece of art.
Which is the exact instinct that leads straight to the advertising graveyard.
Really?
Yes, this is perhaps Hopkins's most brilliant and counterintuitive insight. The trap of fine writing and entertainment.
Okay.
He states unequivocally that fine writing, unique literary style, and oratorical graces are actually distinct disadvantages in advertising.
I can hear every creative director at every ad agency in the world screaming right now.
I know.
Why would being an exceptional poetic writer be a disadvantage when you are trying to persuade people?
Because it comes down to the cognitive defense mechanisms of the consumer.
Okay, defense mechanisms.
When a buyer senses fine talk, when they can feel the slickness, the heavy polish, the clever wordplay, it immediately triggers suspicion. It's the psychological equivalent of watching a magic trick.
Oh, I like that. Break that down for me.
Well, when you watch a magician perform a card trick, what happens the moment their hands move a little too smoothly, or they add an unnecessary theatrical flourish?
Your brain immediately stops looking at the card and starts looking for the deception.
Exactly. The excessive polish alerts you that you are being manipulated. You think, why is he trying so hard to distract me with his hands?
Ah, I see.
The exact same mechanism applies to reading slick advertising copy. When the writing is overly poetic or dangerously clever, the buyer stops looking at the product and starts looking at the trick.
They realize they're being sold to.
Consciously or subconsciously, yes, and their guard goes up. They suspect the seller is relying on literary charm because the actual merit of the product is weak.
That makes perfect sense. If the product is actually incredible, you don't need a smoke machine to present it. You just show the product.
Exactly.
If you have a cure for a disease, you don't write a poem about it. You just state the facts.
Right. Hopkins notes that money spending is a very serious matter for people. They work hard for their capital.
They really do.
When they're deciding whether to part with it, they want to know they're making a sound, logical, risk-mitigated decision. They do not want to buy something just because a copywriter made a clever pun.
So all that frivolity, loud typography, and fine writing actually insults the intelligence of a serious buyer.
It does.
Yeah.
When an ad seeks applause for its creativity, rather than focusing on the hard facts of the product, it has completely abandoned its purpose. It ceases to be salesmanship and becomes subsidized entertainment.
Let me play devil's advocate again, though.
Sure.
Because the context of when Hopkins wrote this matters. We are living in a drastically different media environment now. People are doom scrolling on their phones.
Right.
We constantly hear that attention spans are dead, that you have maybe 2 seconds to hook someone before they swipe away. The modern playbook says you must use massive text, fast cuts, and extreme brevity just to get noticed.
Yeah, that's the prevailing wisdom.
But Hopkins explicitly argues against artificial brevity. He says people comfortably read 8-point type. How can we possibly apply his advice to an environment that moves this fast?
By fundamentally misunderstanding the difference between an uninterested scroller and a high-intent prospect, modern marketers destroy their own conversions.
Okay, what's the difference?
The goal of advertising is not to trick a million uninterested people into momentarily glaring at your logo by using neon colors and massive fonts.
Right.
That is the equivalent of a salesman standing in a crowded subway station with a megaphone screaming random words. Everyone turns to look, but absolutely no one pulls out their wallet.
Because they don't actually care.
Exactly. The goal is to identify the people who actually have the problem your product solves and give them the information they need to make a decision.
So intent changes the cognitive load they're willing to bear.
Precisely. Hopkins' argument about the 8-point type is a masterclass in human psychology. People will read entire 500-page novels in tiny 8-point type. They read dense financial reports in 8-point type.
Why? Because they're deeply interested in the subject matter.
Exactly. If someone has a severe pest problem in their home, and your ad promises a permanent solution, they don't need the text to be in a massive neon 40-point font.
No, they'll read the fine print.
They will read 2,000 words of dense clinical explanation about how your extermination process works because the information is highly relevant to their immediate pain.
So if you try to be artificially brief just to cater to a mythical short attention span, you are actually doing a disservice to the real buyer.
Yes, you are.
You might edit out the exact technical detail or specific benefit that would have convinced the high-intent prospect to hand over their money, all because you are worried about boring the uninterested scroller who is never going to buy anyway.
Precisely. The practical application here is brutal but necessary. Strip the cleverness out of your campaigns. Fire the metaphorical smoke machines.
Stop trying to win industry awards.
Stop trying to win awards for being visually stunning or exceptionally brief. Aim for clear, sincere, factual conviction that respects the buyer's intelligence.
And provides enough substantive information for them to make a serious financial decision.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've stripped away the vanity metrics, we've acknowledged the immense financial stakes, and we've fired the poets and magicians.
Right.
We are left with the mandate to write plain, factual salesmanship. But how do we actually know how to sound?
That's a challenge.
Because when you sit down at a keyboard, it's very easy to slip back into marketing speak.
Oh, it's so easy.
Hopkins provides a mechanism to prevent this, which is arguably the most valuable practical tool in the entire chapter, the litmus test of the typical buyer.
Yes. It's a mechanism designed to counteract a very specific cognitive bias. Hopkins warns that writers must never think of people in the mass.
Never in the mass.
When you sit at your desk and conceptualize your audience as a million people, your view instantly blurs. You lose all specificity. Hopkins' golden rule is to design the pitch for a single, typical individual. To answer any question about your advertising, whether a headline is good, whether a paragraph is necessary, whether an image works, you ask one simple question.
What is it?
Would it help me sell the goods if I met a buyer in person?
The mass audience bias is a silent killer for modern businesses, especially in B2B tech and startups. I see this all the time.
But at Consulate.
A founder builds a great piece of inventory management software. When they sit down to write the landing page, they get paralyzed because they think, I am broadcasting this to the global internet. I need to sound like Apple. I need to sound like Nike.
Yeah, they want to sound visionary.
So they adopt this bizarre, generalized, pseudo-inspirational tone. They write headlines like, empowering the synergistic future of supply chain paradigms.
It means absolutely nothing. It's a string of buzzwords that no human being has ever used in a natural conversation.
Right, because when we try to speak to everyone, we end up speaking to no one. We project, we puff out our chests, we become boastful and performative. But watch what happens when you force that same founder to use the typical buyer litmus test.
How does the tonality shift?
It's night and day. Imagine that same founder is sitting across a coffee shop table from Dave, a warehouse manager who is exhausted and stressed out.
Okay, Dave, the warehouse manager.
If the founder looks Dave in the eye and says, Dave, my software empowers the synergistic future of your supply chain paradigms, Dave is going to think the founder is having a stroke.
He's going to get up and leave.
He really is.
No.
But because the founder is looking at a single, stressed-out human being, his empathy kicks in. His tone naturally, organically shifts.
All right.
He leans in, drops the jargon, and says, look, Dave, I know you spend 4 hours every Friday manually matching purchase orders to inventory receipts, and it drives you crazy. My software automatically syncs them the second the truck hits the dock. You can go home at 3 p.m. on Fridays.
And Dave pulls out the corporate credit card right there.
Instantly.
Because the pitch wasn't a performance for a stadium. It was a highly specific, empathetic solution offered to a single individual in pain.
The shift from mass broadcasting to individual consultation completely removes the ego from the writing.
You stop trying to sound impressive and start trying to be helpful.
That is the litmus test in action. Listeners, you can apply this literally the minute this deep dive ends. Take the last marketing email you wrote or the script for your latest promotional video and read it out loud.
Yes, read it out loud.
Imagine you are saying those exact words to a single prospect sitting 3 feet away from you. If it feels weird, if you feel embarrassed, if it sounds boastful or overly loud, delete it. Rewrite it until it sounds like a sincere, knowledgeable expert explaining a solution to a friend.
But this introduces the final and perhaps most difficult hurdle.
Oh, what's that?
It is very easy to say, write for a single typical buyer like Dave. But how do you actually know what Dave wants to hear?
Ah.
How do you know that Dave hates Friday purchase order matching? You cannot guess this from your corporate headquarters.
Which brings us to Hopkins' final key concept. Boots on the ground. Research over guesswork.
Yes. Hopkins makes a fascinating historical observation here. He notes that the most successful ad writers he knew, the absolute titans of the industry who were driving millions in revenue, were almost always former house-to-house canvassers.
Door-to-door salesmen. The people doing the hardest, most grueling sales work on the planet.
Exactly. Before they ever put pen to paper to write a national print campaign, they had already spent years knocking on doors, standing on porches, and talking to thousands of actual human beings face to face.
So they weren't guessing.
Not at all. They learned, through brutal trial and error, exactly what made a housewife open the screen door, what made a farmer listen to a pitch, and what specific words caused a door to be slammed in their face.
Talk about a feedback loop.
Right. Even when they transitioned to writing national ads, they didn't rely on intuition. They would spend weeks interviewing hundreds of customers, sending out questionnaires, and studying actual consumer reactions before spending a single dollar on mass media.
Contrast that with how things are done today.
Oh, it's night and day.
A team of executives sits in a glass conference room, orders expensive catering, and brainstorms what they think the customer wants, purely based on their own internal assumptions.
It's just guessing.
And Hopkins points out something deeply humbling here. The creator of the product is often the absolute worst person to write the advertisement for it.
This is a psychological trap known as the maker's bias, and it is devastating to conversions.
The maker's bias. Break that down.
The manufacturer, the software engineer, the founder, they are deeply emotionally invested in how the product is made. They spent 2 years agonizing over the supply chain, the factory machinery, or the elegance of the code base.
Right, they poured their soul into it.
To them, the product is an engineering marvel. So when they sit down to write an ad, what do they talk about?
They talk about the code.
They talk about the factory. They brag about the proprietary algorithms.
But the consumer doesn't care about the algorithm. The consumer doesn't care about the factory.
Not even a little bit. The consumer is ruthlessly self-interested. They only care about what the product will do for them. What is the tangible benefit? Does it save me time? Does it make me money? Does it alleviate my pain?
Wow.
Hopkins is adamant that the #1 reason for business failure is trying to sell people what they do not want.
And what's the second reason?
Writing ads to please the seller's ego rather than answering the buyer's needs.
We really need to dwell on the psychological pain of overcoming this maker's bias because it's not just a strategic error, it's an emotional hurdle.
It is incredibly difficult for founders.
Imagine you are a developer who just spent 8 months building the most elegant, complex machine learning backend for an app. It is your masterpiece.
You're so proud of it.
But through research, you discover that the only reason users are actually buying your app is because of a tiny, simple feature you coded in an afternoon that lets them export a PDF with 1 click.
It is incredibly painful for the creator to accept that. Their ego demands that the marketing focus on the 8 months of brilliant machine learning. They want validation for their hard work.
But if they write an ad bragging about the machine learning, they go bankrupt.
Exactly.
If they swallow their pride, ignore their masterpiece, and write a boring ad about the 1-click PDF export, they become millionaires. The market doesn't reward your effort. It rewards your ability to solve the buyer's specific problem.
And you can never discover that the PDF export is the real selling point unless you actually talk to the users. You have to step outside the factory.
Desk work, as Hopkins notes, is incredibly expensive.
You cannot project your own desires onto the market. You have to submit to what the market actually wants.
But practically speaking, we don't have armies of door-to-door canvassers anymore. If you are running a digital business or selling SaaS products globally, you can't pack a briefcase and walk through neighborhoods in London, New York, and Tokyo.
No, you can't.
How do we apply this rigorous boots-on-the-ground research principle in the modern era?
The medium has evolved, but the underlying methodology is entirely accessible. You simply have to find the modern digital equivalents of the front porch.
Oh, I love that. The digital front porch.
Where do your customers gather to complain, discuss, and seek solutions? You go to highly specific niche subreddits and read the deeply frustrated posts of people trying to solve the problem your product addresses?
Yes.
You analyze the exact language they use to describe their pain, and you use those exact words in your copy. You set up customer discovery calls, not to pitch your product, but simply to listen to them talk about their workflow.
You go to Amazon and you read the 1-star reviews of your biggest competitors. You find out exactly what people hate about the current market offerings.
Right.
And then you read the 5-star reviews to find out the hidden, unexpected benefits people actually value.
That is digital canvassing. You are actively listening to the market instead of projecting your boardroom theories onto it. When you radically center the buyer's interests and you do the unglamorous work of analyzing their actual behavior and complaints, writing the ad becomes incredibly easy.
You aren't inventing a clever hook.
No, you are simply echoing their own desires back to them and presenting your product as the logical solution.
This is a perfect place to synthesize everything we've unpacked today.
It really is.
We started by looking at this somewhat clinical 1920s mandate that advertising is nothing more than multiplied salesmanship. We talked about strict unit economics, the dangers of fine writing, and the ruthless elimination of vanity metrics.
Right.
On the surface, Hopkins might sound like a cold, calculating mathematician, but when you really pull all these threads together, what he is demanding of us is something profoundly human.
I completely agree. When you combine the absolute rejection of vanity, the requirement for sincere, plain-spoken facts, the litmus test of sitting across from a single human being,
And the mandate to obsessively research and prioritize the consumer's actual desires over your own engineering pride.
exactly. What emerges isn't a cold equation. It's a framework for profound empathy.
Yes, true advertising, the kind that builds generational wealth and creates products that actually matter, is an act of radical empathy disguised as plain-spoken salesmanship.
That's a great way to put it.
It requires you to completely strip away your ego. You must abandon your desire to look clever, you must kill your need for applause, and you must overcome your own maker's bias.
You have to humbly sit across that metaphorical table from a single, stressed-out customer.
Listen to them deeply and sincerely offer them exactly what they need to make their life better. It's not about you at all. It is entirely about them.
And the moment a business accepts that reality, their marketing stops being a black hole of expense and transforms into a measurable, accountable engine for growth.
I want to challenge everyone listening to take action on this immediately. Don't let this just be interesting theory. Open your Sent folder, pull up your company's homepage, or look at the pitch deck you are building for next week.
Look at it closely.
Look at it through the unforgiving lens of Hopkins' super salesman. Is your writing screaming for applause and trying to perform a magic trick? Or is it sitting across the table having a sincere, helpful conversation?
Are you bragging about how hard you worked on the factory, or are you proving how you can solve their problem?
Run the litmus test and be willing to delete the cleverness. Now, if advertising is simply salesmanship and our only job is to secure the sale, it begs a massive, somewhat paradoxical question.
What is the actual secret to making that sale without ever appearing desperate or pushy?
Exactly. Next time, we'll dive into Chapter 3, where we discover why the most profitable, high-converting ads in history, well, they never actually ask anyone to buy anything.
The absolute best advertisements in the world never actually ask you to buy anything.
Not a single thing.
Let that sit for just a moment, The absolute best advertisements in the world never actually ask you to buy anything.
It's completely counterintuitive.
Right. Whether you are drafting a landing page right now, or maybe preparing to pitch a major client this afternoon, or honestly, just trying to convince your partner to try a new restaurant tonight, we are about to completely dismantle the conventional wisdom you have surrounding persuasion.
Because it really is a profound paradigm shift. I mean, we are culturally conditioned from a very young age to believe that selling inherently requires, well, asking.
Yeah, you have to make the pitch.
Exactly. The assumption is that to acquire something, whether that is a customer's money or their time or just their agreement, you have to request it. You have to demand it or, make an active, forceful play for it.
Got to close the deal.
Right. But the historical data from the absolute highest performing campaigns, combined with the psychological reality of how human beings actually make decisions, it points to the exact opposite conclusion.
I want to frame this for you, the listener, because when you look at traditional, aggressive, buy my brand advertising, the kind of messaging we're all bombarded with thousands of times a day on our phones, on billboards, in our inboxes.
Oh, that's everywhere.
It is, and it mirrors the exact dynamic of a truly terrible first date.
That is the perfect analogy.
Right. Think about the mechanics of that scenario.
Yeah.
You sit down at the table. Perhaps you haven't even, ordered a drink yet.
You're just getting settled.
Yeah. And the person across from you immediately launches into this massive monologue exclusively about themselves.
Just me, me, me.
Exactly. They detail how great they are, how long they've been working in their prestigious field, the awards they've won, how efficient they are.
They completely ignore you.
Totally. They don't ask about your day or your needs or your preferences. And then, right before the appetizers even arrive, they lean across the table and ask you for a massive favor.
And in the corporate world, that favor is your money.
Right.
And the reaction that kind of behavior provokes in a social setting is the exact same reaction it provokes in a commercial setting.
It's just exhausting.
It is exhausting. But more importantly, from a behavioral standpoint, it immediately triggers our defensive instincts.
Oh, for sure.
When you are sitting across from that terrible date, you aren't contemplating how you can help them achieve their goals, right? Your brain is actively calculating the fastest, most polite route to the exit.
You're checking your watch. You're hoping your friend remembers to send you that, fake emergency text so you can bail.
Exactly. You are closing yourself off completely.
But if that dynamic is universally recognized as repulsive in human interaction, why do so many incredibly smart, well-funded businesses act exactly like that bad date when they try to communicate with the market?
It's a huge disconnect.
Why is there this massive gap between how we act as people and how we act as companies?
Well, because the moment people step into a corporate environment or, try to sell something, they often fall victim to their own internal perspective.
They get tunnel vision.
Exactly. They get trapped by the mechanics of their own business. I mean, they know the immense amount of labor that went into developing their product. They feel the pressure of their quarterly quotas,
The overhead costs.
the profit margins, the competition, all of it. And they erroneously project all of those internal operational pressures outward onto the consumer.
Which is a huge mistake.
It's the biggest mistake. They forget the foundational rule of human nature, which is that the consumer does not care about any of those internal struggles.
Which perfectly sets up the mission for our deep dives today.
Oh.
We are cracking open a very specific, highly influential piece of text.
Chapter 3 of Claude Hopkins' foundational work.
Yes, scientific advertising.
Yeah.
And the chapter is titled, simply and perhaps a bit deceptively, Offer Service.
And to understand the real weight of this, we need to establish exactly who Claude Hopkins was and the era he was operating in.
Because it wasn't recently.
No, he published this book back in 1923.
Over a century ago.
Right. And prior to Hopkins, advertising was largely considered a dark art. It was a gamble.
Just throw stuff at the wall and see what sticks.
Exactly. It was dominated by loud, boastful snake oil tactics. Hopkins was the man who looked at this chaotic landscape and introduced the scientific method.
He brought the map.
He really did. He pioneered test marketing, systematic sampling, split testing, coupon tracking. I mean, he brought rigorous mathematical order to persuasion.
Yeah, there is a famous quote in the advertising industry that there is more real-world, actionable psychology in this fast-reading little book than you will find in a 4-year university marketing curriculum.
I would absolutely agree with that.
And what we're going to unpack today is his central thesis in Chapter 3, that flipping your operational script from a seller's perspective to a servant's perspective is the ultimate shortcut to bypassing human defenses.
It's brilliant.
We are going to explore why appealing purely, unashamedly to human selfishness is actually the most reliable, mathematically proven way to build a deeply loyal audience.
It definitely sounds like a paradox, doesn't it? I mean, leveraging inherent human selfishness to cultivate long-term brand loyalty.
It sounds wrong when you say it out loud.
It does. But as Hopkins systematically lays out, understanding and catering to that selfishness is the bedrock of all successful persuasion.
So let's examine that bedrock.
Oh.
Because Hopkins doesn't tiptoe around the reality of human nature.
No.
He opens the chapter with a statement that might actually offend some people today.
Oh, I'm sure it would.
He writes, "Remember, the people you address are selfish, as we all are. They care nothing about your interest or profit. They seek service for themselves."
Wow.
Yeah. That is a tough pill for a lot of modern, mission-driven companies to swallow.
It is, but if we look at it from an evolutionary psychology perspective, it is an undeniable reality.
How so?
Well, every single person you address, regardless of the medium, is biologically wired to be intensely protective of their own resources.
Survival instincts.
Exactly. And those resources include their money, yes, but more crucially, their time, their attention, and their cognitive energy.
Right, because we live in an environment of constant stimulus.
Constant. To survive, our brains have to aggressively filter out anything that does not directly benefit us or, ensure our survival and comfort.
It's just cognitive load management.
Right. So when a company publishes an advertisement that fundamentally says, buy my brand, give me the trade you give to others, let me have your money, they are completely ignoring this biological reality.
They are essentially demanding energy.
Yes. They are demanding that the consumer expend energy and resources without offering a clear, immediate survival or comfort benefit in return.
That makes perfect sense when you frame it around cognitive load and resource protection. But what strikes me is how prevalent that exact flawed messaging still is today.
Oh, it's everywhere.
You see it constantly, particularly in, like, local or independent business marketing. Companies essentially begging for patronage just because they exist.
Yeah.
You see signs saying, support our local business, or emails from startups saying, help us reach our year-end milestone.
Help us.
Right. They're framing the transaction entirely around their own needs.
And we really have to analyze the specific psychological resistance that kind of messaging creates in you, the prospective buyer.
What happens in our brains?
Well, what's fascinating here is that when a business says, give me the trade you give to others, you instantly feel hunted.
Hunted, wow.
You are being explicitly asked to sacrifice your hard-earned resources for a stranger's benefit. You are being asked to take on their burden.
Which we naturally resist.
Strongly. Hopkins recognized over a century ago that ignoring the inherent selfishness of the consumer isn't just a slight faux pas, it is an incredibly costly operational mistake. It actively builds a wall between you and the buyer.
I sometimes think about it like, imagine walking up to a complete stranger on the street who is holding a cup of coffee.
Okay.
And you just walk up to them and say, hey, I notice you usually buy your coffee at the shop on the corner. Well, I have a coffee shop too, and I have rent to pay. So I want your $5 instead. Please give it to me.
That is completely unhinged.
Right. We would look at that person and think they were crazy. Yet, when we put a screen or printed page between ourselves and the consumer, businesses engage in this exact behavior every single day.
Which naturally leads to the core problem. If explicitly asking for the sale creates this biological and psychological wall of resistance, how do you actually facilitate a transaction?
How do you sell if you can't ask people to buy?
Exactly. Hopkins argues that the truly masterful campaigns bypass the ask entirely. He notes that the most effective advertisements often don't even quote a price.
Wait, really?
Yeah, they frequently don't even mention where you can find the product in stores.
Okay, stop right there. Because from a modern performance marketing perspective, that sounds like commercial suicide.
It does sound crazy.
If I am paying thousands of dollars for ad placement, and I don't include a price, and I don't include a clear where to buy call to action, what exactly am I paying to put in front of people?
You are paying to place a pure offer of service.
Just service.
Just service.
Yeah.
Instead of a pitch, you base the entire message on utility. You offer wanted information that solves a problem they have right now.
Okay.
Or you highlight clear, undeniable advantages to the user that require no immediate commitment. Or, crucially, you offer a tangible sample.
Sample.
Right. You frame the interaction by saying, let us buy the first package for you, or let us send this to you on approval so you can prove these claims to yourself without risking a single penny of your own money.
So the strategy is to completely eliminate the friction of the ask.
Entirely.
I'm thinking about how someone listening to this could apply it immediately, because it implies a total communication audit.
It really does.
You have to look at your outbound emails, your landing pages, your pitch decks, and ruthlessly eliminate any phrase that fundamentally translates to, give me your money.
You have to erase it.
And replace all of that real estate with, here's a specific way I can serve you right now.
Precisely. You have to dismantle the threat. When a truly skilled salesperson approaches a prospect, they do not simply shout a brand name or rattle off a list of features.
Right.
They mentally place themselves on the customer side of the table. They picture the customer's desires and fears so intimately that they can present their service in a way where the natural, unavoidable, logical conclusion for the customer is to buy.
The purchase becomes the customer's idea.
Yes, exactly. Not the salesperson's demand.
But let me push back on this a little bit, because this sounds incredibly noble. It sounds like pure altruism, just giving things away out of the goodness of your heart.
Right.
But businesses are not charities. They have to generate revenue to survive. So how is this not just a fast track to bankruptcy?
And that is the exact tension Hopkins addresses. Because to the untrained eye, or to the consumer receiving the offer, these methods absolutely look altruistic.
They look like charity.
They do. But Hopkins explicitly writes, some of these ads seem altruistic, but they are based on the knowledge of human nature.
So it's deliberate.
Very deliberate. It is not charity. It is a highly calculated, masterful application of behavioral psychology. True salesmanship is the art of wrapping your commercial intent in an impenetrable layer of genuine service.
Stealth salesmanship.
Stealth salesmanship,
Yep.
exactly.
Let's ground this in the real world, because Hopkins provides a brilliant historical example that illustrates this perfectly.
Yeah.
He talks about the brush maker.
Oh, this is a fantastic example.
Let's set the scene for this, because the context is so crucial. It is the early 1920s. Door-to-door sales are a massive, dominant industry in America.
Huge.
And it is a brutal profession. I mean, it is grueling, physically demanding work characterized by constant daily rejection.
People were completely tired of peddlers.
Completely. Yet Hopkins describes a specific brush manufacturer that has an army of 2,000 canvassers successfully selling brushes from house to house.
Employing 2,000 active, profitable canvassers in an era where the public is inherently hostile to door-to-door salesmen, that is an operational triumph.
It's practically a miracle.
It requires a methodology that completely bypasses the standard homeowner defenses.
Exactly, because if those 2,000 men walked up to a front porch, knocked on the heavy wooden door, and simply asked the homeowner, "Would you like to buy a brush today?"
they would experience a near 100% rejection rate.
The door would be slammed in their face before they even finished the sentence.
Absolutely.
But they do not do that. Hopkins details their exact script. The canvasser knocks, the door opens, and he says, "I was sent here to give you a brush. I have samples here, and I want you to take your choice."
We have to analyze the immediate psychological shift that occurs the second those specific words are spoken.
What happens?
The dynamic of the interaction is instantaneously inverted. The homeowner opens the door, prepared for a conflict, right? She is prepared to defend her territory and her wallet against an intruder asking for something.
Her guard is completely up.
But the canvasser disarmed her by declaring he is not a taker, but a giver.
Hopkins actually notes the result of this opening line. He says the homeowner is suddenly all smiles and attention.
The hostility evaporates.
It just vanishes. But let's dig into the mechanics of that specific phrase. I want you to take your choice from these samples. Why is that better than just, handing her a standard free brush and walking away?
That is where the true psychological genius of the strategy lies. By asking the prospect to actively choose her free gift, the canvasser forces her to engage with his entire inventory.
Oh, wow.
She cannot just passively accept an item. She has to physically look at the scrub brush, evaluate the hairbrush, and examine the sweeping brush in order to make her selection.
She is processing the utility of every single item he sells. She is literally window shopping through his entire catalog right there on her porch. But her guard is completely down because she believes she is only doing it to select her free item.
She is in a state of reception, not defense. And Hopkins points out the natural consequence of this enforced engagement.
Oh, yes.
In the process of evaluating the brushes to pick her free one, she inevitably spots several other brushes she realizes she actually needs or wants for her home.
It's spotting something you want and actually pulling out your wallet to buy it from a complete stranger on your porch are two very different things.
Very different.
This is where I think Hopkins touches on something really profound. He writes that after she makes her selection, she doesn't just want the other brushes, she is also anxious to reciprocate the gift.
Yes.
So she places an order. He is describing the law of reciprocity decades before modern behavioral economics gave it a formal name.
It is a fundamental pillar of human social interaction. The urge to reciprocate is deeply ingrained in our evolutionary history.
How far back does that go?
Oh, to early human societies. Survival depended on the sharing of resources. Food, tools, shelter. If someone gave you something of value, it created an unwritten social contract, a debt.
That's social debt.
Right. We evolved to feel psychological discomfort when we hold a social debt. We feel an overwhelming, almost subconscious urge to balance the scales.
It's the reason why, even today, if an acquaintance unexpectedly buys your coffee, you don't just say thanks and move on.
No, you'd feel terrible.
Right. You immediately say, "Oh, wow, thank you. I'll get lunch next time," or "I'll cover the drinks tonight." You feel the immediate need to restore equilibrium.
Exactly. And the brush canvasser triggers that ancient biological urge. By giving the brush unconditionally, without demanding a purchase first, he establishes a social debt.
And she wants to clear that debt.
The homeowner buys the additional brushes not because she was subjected to high-pressure sales tactics, and not even purely because she needed them. She buys them because purchasing them allows her to restore the social balance. She actually feels good about the transaction.
It is such a brilliant mechanism. You give before you ask. You lower the drawbridge over the moat by offering a genuine, no-strings-attached piece of value first.
It works every time.
So for anyone trying to apply this to their own business, the vital question becomes, what is your version of the free brush?
What is your brush? Exactly.
Right. What tangible piece of value can you put directly into your prospect's hands for free that drops their defensive guard and makes them receptive to your wider ecosystem?
But there is a critical caveat to that application that we have to mention.
Okay, what is it?
The free brush cannot be a cheap gimmick. It cannot be some useless trinket.
It has to have actual value.
Yes, the entire psychological weight of the reciprocity relies entirely on the perceived value of the gift. If the gift is perceived as worthless, no social debt is created, and the urge to reciprocate never materializes.
It just feels like spam.
Exactly. It must be a genuine offer of service.
That brings up a massive logistical challenge, though. Offering a high-value free brush might get the door open and secure one initial order. But a business can't survive on a single transaction per customer, especially if they're eating the cost of a free item every time.
Right. The unit economics wouldn't make sense.
Exactly. So how do you transition from that one brilliant, disarming interaction into a long-term, profitable relationship? Hopkins addresses this by illustrating what we can think of as the Trojan horse of continued service.
He does. He recognizes that the initial service gets you past the defenses, but you need a secondary mechanism. You need a way to embed the product into the consumer's daily routine, turning a trial into an unbreakable habit.
He provides this fascinating example of a coffee distribution company, and the scale of this operation is staggering. He notes they operate via horse-drawn wagons in some 500 cities.
500 cities in the 1920s.
The logistical overhead of that is just hard to fathom. But anyway, the canvasser drops in on a home with a half-pound package of coffee and says, "Accept this package and try it. I'll come back in a few days to ask how you liked it."
Notice again, we see the complete absence of a commercial pitch.
Nothing.
The initial interaction is framed entirely as a request for an opinion accompanied by a gift.
Right. But the genius unfolds when he returns. A few days later, the salesman comes back. Now, the conventional approach would be to say, "Did you like the free coffee? Great. Please buy a full pound now."
That's what 99% of people would do.
But he still doesn't ask for an order. Instead, Hopkins explains, the salesman presents a beautiful, high-quality kitchen utensil.
A pan, a pot, something useful.
Yeah. He tells the homeowner she can have it right now. It isn't free, but if she enjoyed the coffee, he will credit her 5 cents on every subsequent pound of coffee she buys from him until the utensil is completely paid off.
Hopkins summarizes this brilliantly with the phrase, always some service.
When I read that, it took me a minute to process the sophistication of what this wagon driver is doing. He is deploying a gamified loyalty rewards program and a continuity subscription model, all executed in person a century ago.
It's mind-blowing, and the psychological framing here is what makes it so devastatingly effective.
How so?
The salesman is no longer selling coffee. Coffee has actually become a commodity in this interaction. Instead, he is offering the homeowner a zero-friction pathway to acquire a premium kitchen item she desires. He has completely reframed the transaction.
The coffee is just the vehicle she uses to earn the prize.
Exactly.
She isn't buying coffee, she is paying off her new favorite pan.
He has perfectly aligned his desired outcome recurring coffee sales with her desired outcome, which is acquiring the utensil.
It's a win-win in her mind.
And Hopkins provides another example in this section that takes this concept of de-risking a trial even further, dealing with a much more complex product, the maker of an electric sewing machine motor.
Oh, this example highlights a massive friction point. Hopkins notes this manufacturer found traditional advertising incredibly difficult. And when you think about the context, it makes total sense.
Absolutely.
Electricity in the average home was still a relatively novel and, honestly, intimidating concept in the early 1920s.
People were terrified of it.
Right. Asking a homeowner, via print advertisement, to purchase an electric motor and attach it to their familiar mechanical foot pedal sewing machine was a monumental ask. The perceived risk, financial, practical, and even physical, was astronomical.
So, recognizing this insurmountable wall of friction, the manufacturer ceased soliciting purchases altogether.
Just stop pitching.
They abandoned the traditional pitch entirely. Instead, they ran advertisements offering to send a motor to any home delivered through a local dealer for 1 full week of use.
And they didn't just mail a heavy, confusing motor in a wooden box and hope for the best.
That would have been a disaster.
The advertisement explicitly stated, "Let us help you for a week without cost or obligation." Along with the motor, they sent an actual technician to the house to install it and teach the customer exactly how to operate it safely.
They systematically audited every conceivable point of friction and eliminated it through service.
Every single one.
They removed the financial risk by not requiring payment. They removed the educational barrier by providing in-person instruction. They removed the installation labor. They framed the entire immense logistical effort simply as, let us help you.
The result of this massive undertaking. Hopkins reports that the offer was resistless and that approximately 9 out of every 10 trials resulted in a finalized sale.
9 out of 10.
A 90% conversion rate on a high-ticket, intimidating piece of novel technology. It's unreal.
To understand why that conversion rate was so astronomically high, we really need to look beyond the 1920s and examine the findings of modern behavioral economics. Specifically, the work of psychologists like Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky regarding what is known as the endowment effect.
I know Kahneman won a Nobel Prize for his work in behavioral economics, but let's break down how his theories explain a 1920s sewing machine motor. How does the endowment effect actually work in the brain?
Well, the endowment effect describes a cognitive bias where human beings ascribe significantly more value to an object simply because they possess it.
Just because they have it.
Right. In Kahneman's famous experiments, he gave half a room of students a standard coffee mug and the other half nothing. When he asked the students with the mugs how much they would sell them for, they demanded a price roughly twice as high as what the students without the mugs were willing to pay to acquire them.
Wow.
The mere act of ownership instantly inflated the item's psychological value.
So applying that to our sewing machine motor.
Precisely. Once that electric motor is physically installed in the house, once the woman learns how to use it, and crucially, once she experiences the massive visceral relief of not having to manually pump that heavy iron pedal for hours to sew.
Which was exhausting work.
Very exhausting. The motor mentally transitions from being the company's trial product to being her motor.
She takes psychological ownership of it before she ever pays for it.
Yes. And this triggers another powerful cognitive bias Kahneman identified, loss aversion.
Right.
We feel the pain of losing something roughly twice as intensely as we feel the pleasure of gaining that exact same thing.
So taking it away hurts.
Tremendously. To have the technician return at the end of the week, unscrew the motor, and take it away wouldn't just feel like returning a trial item. It would feel like a profound, painful loss.
It would be a forced downgrade in her daily quality of life.
Exactly. The psychological pain of losing the motor becomes vastly greater than the financial pain of handing over the money to keep it.
That is an incredibly potent way to view it. And it is so deeply ingrained in how we operate today. Think about how software companies use this.
Well, it's their entire model.
Right. You sign up for a 30-day free trial of a project management tool or maybe a streaming service. For the first 3 days, you're just kicking the tires.
Just looking around.
But by day 29, you've invited your team, you've built out your workflow, the algorithm has learned your preferences, your data is integrated. Canceling it doesn't just mean saving $20 a month. It means destroying a piece of your digital infrastructure.
The pain of loss outweighs the cost.
Completely. And Hopkins documents how widespread this understanding was among the most successful mail-order companies of his time. He lists cigar manufacturers sending out boxes with instructions to smoke 10, then keep them or return them.
Manufacturers of books, typewriters, massive kitchen cabinets.
Vacuum sweepers. They were all shipping heavy, expensive products across the country without a single cent of prepayment. Their entire model was based on the premise, use them a week, then do as you wish.
They completely de-risked the decision for the consumer, knowing the psychology of the endowment effect would essentially do the selling for them.
So the crucial takeaway for anyone trying to build a business today is this. You have to engineer a way to let your prospective customer test drive your value so deeply and integrate it so thoroughly into their life or business that functioning without your product feels like an unacceptable downgrade.
You have to figure out how to install your motor in their life.
I love that.
Yeah.
Which brings us to perhaps the most fascinating and, frankly, frustrating contradiction in the entire chapter. Hopkins identifies a massive blind spot in the advertising industry.
It's the great irony of this whole discussion.
Yeah. Hopkins points out that the most uneducated, marginalized street peddlers, the door-to-door canvassers surviving entirely on commission, they understand the psychology of service perfectly.
Instinctively.
Right. They know that to survive the day, they must smile, they must offer a free brush, they must humble themselves and be of absolute service. Yet, the highly educated, highly paid executives sitting in plush offices writing print advertisements completely forget this fundamental truth.
Hopkins describes this disconnect vividly. He writes, "The salesman in print very often forgets them. He talks about his interest, he blazons a name as though that was of importance. His phrase is drive people to the stores, and that is his attitude in everything he says."
It is chilling how little has changed. Drive people to the stores. You can walk into any modern corporate marketing meeting today and hear that exact same phrasing.
Oh, every day.
Marketing managers sitting around a polished conference table pointing at a dashboard saying, we need to drive traffic to the landing page. We need to drive more conversions.
They use the language of cattle herders.
Exactly. But Hopkins counters that violently. He states, people can be coaxed but not driven. Whatever they do to please themselves.
And the question we really must analyze is, why does this happen? Why do sophisticated, highly intelligent marketers suddenly forget what a simple door-to-door peddler knows intuitively?
How do they lose their grasp on human nature the moment they sit down to write?
I think it comes down to the environment. When you are a peddler standing on a front porch, looking a skeptical homeowner directly in the eye, the feedback loop is instantaneous and visceral.
You feel it immediately.
Right. If you start boasting about how great your brush company is, or if you demand they buy something to help you meet your quota, the door is immediately slammed in your face.
You suffer an immediate physical rejection.
That physical proximity forces humility. It forces you to offer service just to keep the door open.
That is exactly it. It is the psychology of de-individuation caused by distance.
Yes, the distance is the problem.
When a copywriter or an executive sits in a corporate boardroom, writing a piece of text that will be mass distributed in a magazine or blasted out to 1 million email inboxes, they're entirely shielded from the immediate negative feedback of the consumer.
They don't see the metaphorical door slamming.
Not at all. The distance creates a dangerous ego.
It creates an illusion of control and importance. Without the humbling reality of a face-to-face rejection, the advertiser's ego takes the wheel.
It feels safe to boast.
It feels logical to make your brand logo the largest element on the page. The medium itself strips away the humanity of the interaction. You begin to view the consumer not as an individual human being with fears and desires, but as an abstract mass.
They become a metric on a spreadsheet.
Exactly. They become traffic that you genuinely believe you can simply drive to a destination.
But people can be coaxed but not driven. That is the fundamental law here. Whatever action they take it strictly to please themselves, to serve their own selfish needs.
And Hopkins warns that billions of dollars are wasted because this simple fact is forgotten. The fatal flaw of the print salesman, or, the digital marketer today, is treating the page or the screen as a megaphone to amplify their own corporate desires.
Instead of using it as a mirror.
Right, rather than using it as a mirror to reflect the customer's desires back to them.
The practical application of this is paramount. You can never let the medium, whether it's an email, a billboard, or a social media, distance you from the biological reality of the buyer.
You have to fight that distance.
You must train yourself to treat every single piece of written or digital communication as if you were standing face-to-face with a deeply skeptical, fiercely protective prospect on their front porch.
That's a great visual.
If you wouldn't scream your brand name in their face on the porch, do not make it the only thing they see on your webpage. If you wouldn't beg them to help you reach your quota in person, do not send that email.
You have to actively carry the humility and the service-oriented mindset of the survival-driven street peddler right into the insulated environment of the corporate boardroom.
So let's pull back and synthesize all these disparate threads we've talked about. We have examined the uncomfortable reality of consumer selfishness and cognitive load.
Yep.
We've looked at the stealth salesmanship of offering free value to trigger evolutionary reciprocity.
The brush maker.
Right. We've unpacked the Trojan horse of test drives and how they weaponize the endowment effect, and we've diagnosed the ego trap created by the distance of mass media. When we weave all of this together, what is the ultimate unifying truth of Chapter 3?
The unifying insight is really a profound paradox. True persuasion is never achieved by arguing your own worth.
Never.
It is achieved entirely by making yourself endlessly, undeniably useful to the other person. By voluntarily abandoning the ego-driven posture of the seller and fully adopting the humble posture of the servant, you completely bypass the buyer's natural biological defenses.
It is the ultimate jujitsu of human interaction. By entirely ceasing your desperate efforts to sell and redirecting 100% of your cognitive energy into figuring out how to genuinely serve, you paradoxically become an unstoppable force of salesmanship.
It really works.
Service is not just a nice, warm, and fuzzy corporate responsibility initiative. As Hopkins mathematically proves, it is the most ruthlessly effective, psychologically sound sales strategy ever invented.
Because it doesn't fight human nature, it harnesses it.
Exactly. It uses our selfishness, our deep-seated need for reciprocity, and our intense aversion to loss, and aligns your product perfectly with those powerful psychological currents.
It requires a fundamental rewiring of your operational brain. You must change your default internal question from, how can I get them to buy this, to, what can I offer them right now that they actually deeply want?
That is a masterclass in shifting perspectives, and it changes everything about how you communicate. Now, to wrap up our deep dive today, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final provocative thought to chew on.
I love this part.
We have spent a significant amount of time today discussing Hopkins' examples, which are obviously heavily rooted in the physical world of 1923.
Right.
He talks about offering physical hairbrushes, delivering physical half-pounds of coffee on wagons, and dropping off heavy iron electric motors at a house. When you are holding a physical good, it is relatively easy to comprehend how to offer a tangible sample.
But the global economy has evolved drastically. We operate increasingly in a world devoid of physical goods.
Exactly. So here is the challenge I want you to explore as you apply this chapter to your own work. What if you are selling something completely intangible?
That's the real test.
What if you are a strategic consultant or a digital designer, or you run a software as a service company where the product is just code on a server? How do you offer a free physical brush when your product is invisible?
It's tough.
How do you offer a risk-free sample of your complex expertise or your digital ecosystem without accidentally giving the entire farm away for free and ruining your business model? How do you adapt Hopkins' relentless service-first rule to the realities of the modern inventable economy? I want you to really ponder that.
It requires a massive amount of creativity to effectively sample the intangible. But the critical thing to remember is that while the technology has changed, the underlying neurological and psychological makeup of the consumer has not evolved one single bit since 1923.
Not at all.
They still demand genuine service before they will ever part with their resources.
They absolutely do. The human brain hasn't changed. And once you solve that puzzle, once you master the delicate art of coaxing your specific audience through relentless, perfectly calibrated service, you are immediately going to face a new, much larger problem.
A good problem to have, but still a problem.
True. You have to know how to accurately measure if all of that service and coaxing is actually impacting your bottom line. Which brings us directly into the brutal, unforgiving, strictly math-driven world of mail-order advertising, which we will be decoding in our next deep dive. So, imagine launching a massive business campaign. You know, you've poured your heart into it, your team's energy, your capital.
Right, that's a huge investment.
Exactly. You send it out into the world. And now, imagine knowing exactly, down to the literal fraction of a penny, if that campaign is making you wealthy or if it is just bleeding you dry.
No guessing.
No guessing at all. No opaque brand awareness metrics to hide behind. No flattering feedback from your friends or your board of directors either.
Just the raw numbers.
Yeah, just raw, unfiltered, immediate mathematical truth. I mean, it's a terrifying thought for some people, but for others, it is the ultimate liberation. Welcome to this deep dive.
Glad to be here.
Today, we are not looking at some modern analytics dashboard. We are going straight to the source, to the foundational text of modern marketing. We're talking about Claude Hopkins' scientific advertising. Specifically, we were diving into Chapter 4, which is titled Mail Order Advertising, What It Teaches.
And the lessons in this chapter, they are unforgiving. We are going to look at mail order advertising not as some archaic, dusty practice from the early 1900s, but really as the absolute court of last resort for any entrepreneur, executive, or creator today.
The court of last resort. I like that.
Yeah, because the mission here is to strip away the guesswork entirely. Like, if you want to stop paying what basically amounts to a vanity tax for your own pride, this text is your blueprint.
Wow.
Hopkins lays out a philosophy of ruthless, numbers-driven accountability. It is a system that removes human ego completely and replaces it with the undisputed verdict of the market.
So in this deep dive, you're going to learn how this incredibly high-stakes environment of early mail-order ads established the unshakable laws of selling. We're going to explore why treating every single advertisement, every email, every landing page like a direct door-to-door salesperson is basically the ultimate shortcut to scaling a business.
And conversely, why ignoring these rules means you're flying blind.
Right. You're just trusting your intuition in a space that actively punishes guesswork. Okay, let's unpack this. Hopkins starts the chapter by calling mail order the severest test of an advertising person. I read that and immediately wondered, what made it so incredibly severe compared to the rest of the advertising world at the time.
Well, the severity comes from the total lack of a safety net.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in general, advertising, even back then, putting up a billboard or running a general magazine ad, you could always blame external factors if your sales didn't go up.
Oh, sure. Like, oh, it was raining that week.
Exactly. You could blame the weather, the sales team, the economy, or just poor retail placement. But in mail order, the cost and the result are inextricably linked, and they are immediately apparent.
Right. There's no middleman.
None. You run a piece of paper in a publication, that piece of paper asks people to send in money or, request a catalog, and then the mail arrives, or it doesn't.
It's that binary.
It is. You count the physical replies, you divide the exact cost of the ad by the number of those replies, and boom, you have your cost per reply. There's absolutely no one to hide.
Yeah, Hopkins uses a rather poetic phrase to describe what happens to all our brilliant, untested ideas in this environment. He says, false theories melt away like snowflakes in the sun.
I love that line.
Right, snowflakes in the sun. Because I think we all construct these elaborate snowmen of theory in our heads.
Oh, constantly.
You sit in a brainstorming meeting or you stare at your screen and you think, the market is really going to love this clever phrasing, or this abstract visual metaphor is going to elevate our brand prestige.
You build this delicate, beautiful theory.
Exactly. But the moment the sun comes out, and the sun being the actual traced returns of paying customers, those theories just vanish if they don't produce a profitable action. I mean, the market does not care how hard you work on the snowman.
It really doesn't. The text makes it abundantly clear that in this particular school, the creator's ego is dismantled almost immediately. Every single mistake becomes glaringly conspicuous.
You literally pay for it.
You do. Hopkins notes that a practitioner quickly loses their conceit because they learn how often their judgment errs. He even quantifies it. He suggests that our unguided human judgment is often wrong 9 times out of 10.
Wait, 9 times out of 10?
9 times out of 10.
That is, that's a staggering blow to anyone who considers themselves a visionary. But, looking closer at the mechanics of this, I realized something.
What's that?
Well, if you accept that your intuition is probably wrong 90% of the time, it actually lifts this immense psychological burden.
Oh, for sure.
You stop trying to be a psychic who predicts what the market wants, and you start acting like a scientist who simply measures what the market does. You rely on the test.
That's a great way to look at it.
But that brings up a massive mechanical question for me. Hopkins talks about tracking returns down to the penny in 1923. Today, obviously, we just use a tracking pixel or like a UTM link. How on earth did they physically trace these returns with such microscopic accuracy a century ago?
So they used a system of keys, and it was honestly remarkably sophisticated in its simplicity. Let's say you're placing the exact same advertisement in 3 different magazines to see which audience converted best.
Okay.
In magazine A, your call to action would say, write to department 4A for your sample. In magazine B, it would say, write to department 4B. And in magazine C, department 4C.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, or you might use varying P.O. box numbers or even slight variations in the street address if you owned a large building.
So when the mail bags actually arrived at the company headquarters, in Chicago or New York, the mailroom clerks were essentially acting as the analytics dashboard.
Precisely. Though I should say they were doing the physical manual labor of a modern algorithm. They would physically sort the incoming envelopes into bins labeled 4A, 4B, and 4C. And at the end of the week, the advertiser knew exactly how many inquiries came from magazine A versus magazine B. But they went even deeper than that.
How so?
They would run completely different headlines in the exact same magazine on alternating weeks, using different keys to test the copy itself.
So they were basically running multivariate testing using scissors, paper, and physical mail bins.
Exactly. And the financial stakes of these tests were existential. I mean, the text gives us a staggering example of this with a man selling a $5 article by mail.
Okay, let's break down the math on this $5 article, because I feel like this is where the abstract theory turns into hard financial reality. Hopkins describes a baseline where the advertiser had a functioning ad running, and the replies from this ad were costing him 85 cents each.
Right. So paying 85 cents to acquire a customer for a $5 product, that leaves plenty of margin for the cost of goods, shipping, overhead.
Yeah, it's a solid functional business.
But then, Hopkins notes, Another man submitted an ad that he thought was an improvement. We can infer it was perhaps more creative, maybe utilizing a different tone or a clever new angle. They ran it with its own unique key.
And what happened?
The replies from that second ad cost $14.20 each.
$14.20 to sell a $5 item.
Yes.
You are literally losing almost $10 every single time someone decides to buy from you. That is a mathematical catastrophe.
It is the definition of scaling yourself into bankruptcy. But the story doesn't end there.
Oh, right.
A third man submitted another ad. And this third ad, tracked over the course of 2 entire years, brought in replies at an average cost of just 41 cents each.
Okay, this is where we need to pause and look at the sheer scale of the leverage here. You have a baseline of 85 cents, a total disaster of $14.20, and a champion ad at 31 cents.
What's fascinating here is that Hopkins asks us to run this math on a larger scale, like the kind of scale a national mail-order business actually operated on. He proposes a volume of 250,000 replies per year.
Okay, I'm following.
If you run the 41-cent ad, acquiring those 250,000 customers costs you $120,500. Now, let's look at the ad that costs $14.20 per reply. To get those same 250,000 replies, you would have to spend over $3.5 million.
$3.5 million versus $100,000.
Exactly.
I mean, that is not a marginal difference. That is the difference between building a generational empire, buying up your competitors, dominating your industry, and completely liquidating your company within a fiscal quarter.
Yeah, you'd be out of business immediately.
And the terrifying part, the truly chilling realization, is that without that physical key tracking system in the mailroom, you wouldn't know which ad was the million-dollar winner and which was the company killer.
You'd have no idea.
If you just looked at the $14.20 ad on a drafting table, I bet it probably looked fantastic. It might have had snappy copy and beautiful illustrations.
Oh, it likely won the subjective approval of everyone in the office. And this is exactly what Hopkins is pointing out. He observes that there are thousands of advertisers participating in general marketing who do exactly what that second man did.
They just guess.
They spend fortunes on the equivalent of $14.20 ads. Without any keys, without any tracked returns. They pay anywhere from 2 to 35 times what they actually need to pay for a sale, purely because they are guessing.
Wow.
They are paying a massive premium because they refuse to submit to this severest test.
Think about the modern parallels to that. Like, how many businesses today, even with the analytics tools we have, are still functionally running $14 ads for a $5 product?
Probably more than we want to know.
They launch a massive brand campaign, they buy up sponsorships, they run full-page spreads in trade magazines, and they justify the spend with untrackable metrics like, share of voice or brand affinity.
Right, vanity metrics.
Yeah, they do it because they like the way the campaign looks, or because the agency told them it was edgy and would win some design award.
But the underlying takeaway from this first concept is absolute. Every business effort, every campaign must have a rigid tracking mechanism. If you do not know the exact cost to acquire a customer, you aren't doing business. You are gambling.
You're just rolling the dice.
Exactly. As Hopkins points out, in the mail order space, you are learning efficiency and economy under a master who simply cannot be fooled. The market doesn't care about your intentions, your cleverness, or the subjective beauty of your campaign. It only reacts to the offer and the clarity of the response mechanism.
And that brutal math forces a very uncomfortable conversation about aesthetics. Because once you start obsessing over the exact fraction of a penny that every single reply costs, you suddenly become incredibly protective of the physical space you are paying for to print that ad.
You have to be.
Which leads us directly into the visual layout, the design philosophy, and frankly, the intentional ugliness of these successful campaigns. It's the ultimate expression of form following function, resulting in the death of useless space.
Right, because in mail order advertising, physical space on the page is literal countable money. Hopkins notes that mail order ads are universally set in small type.
Really small type.
In fact, he emphasizes that they are usually set in smaller type than the ordinary print in the editorial sections of a magazine or newspaper.
I have to admit, my modern design sensibilities are screaming at this concept.
Oh, I'm sure they are.
Because we are taught that, Apple's use of white space is the gold standard. We're taught that a beautiful, spacious layout with large, elegant fonts and plenty of breathing room commands respect. It elevates the perceived value of the product. Cramming a page with tiny, microscopic text feels like a desperate tactic from a bygone era. Surely, a cleaner, larger ad is more pleasant for the consumer to experience.
Well, It undoubtedly is more pleasant to look at, but Hopkins delivers a harsh reality check rooted entirely in the math we just discussed. He says, remember that when you double your space by doubling the size of your type, the ad may still be profitable, but trace returns have proved that you are paying a double price for sales.
Wow. Because if you use a full page to say what you could have perfectly articulated in a half page, you had to pay the publisher twice as much for the insertion.
Exactly. The physical real estate dictates your overhead.
That makes perfect sense.
If that larger, more pleasant, more spacious type doesn't magically double the number of people who pull out their wallets and buy your product, then you have just voluntarily doubled your cost per acquisition.
Just to make it look nice.
Right. In the mail order world, there is absolutely no waste space. Every single millimeter is utilized for active persuasion. Hopkins points out that even borders are rarely used.
Like decorative borders.
Yeah. Think about a decorative border around an ad. It's just fencing. It might take up a half-inch of space all the way around the perimeter. That half-inch represents hundreds or thousands of dollars you paid for space that is not communicating a single benefit of your product.
When you view it through the lens of cost per acquisition, it makes perfect logical sense. But it really requires abandoning the idea that advertising is supposed to be art.
It's not art.
It operates on a stark psychological premise. If the prospect is genuinely interested in what you are selling, they will read the small type. They will lean in.
They absolutely will.
And if they aren't interested in the core offer, making the type huge and adding a pretty border isn't going to trick them into buying it.
Exactly. Hopkins asserts that in these perfected ads, there is no palaver.
No palaver.
Right. There is no empty talk, no throat clearing. There is no boasting, except perhaps boasting of exceptional service that directly benefits the customer. And most critically, he states there is absolutely no attempt at entertainment. There is nothing to amuse.
I think this is where so many modern campaigns completely derail. Because your ad is a proxy for a physical salesperson.
That's the perfect way to frame it.
Imagine a salesperson comes to your office to sell you, I don't know, a complex enterprise software system. You sit down at the conference table, and instead of telling you the specs, the integration timeline, and the ROI, they start doing a tap dance.
Right.
Or they spend the first 10 minutes doing stand-up comedy routines about how crazy the tech industry is. You would throw them out of the building. You'd think they were completely wasting your time.
You'd never buy from them. Yet we see advertisements every single day that prioritize being funny, clever, or cinematic over clearly explaining the value proposition of the product.
Constantly.
Hopkins is reminding us that your marketing has a singular job description to make sales. It is not there to entertain the masses who will never buy from you anyway. And to ensure that the ad completes its job, he highlights one of the most crucial structural elements of the mail order ad, one that relies on a profound understanding of human cognitive psychology.
Which is?
The coupon.
Oh, the coupon. The coupon is such a brilliant intervention into human nature. Why is the coupon almost universally used in these tight, cramped spaces? Like, why give up precious real estate for a dotted line in a little box?
Because human beings are incredibly easily distracted, and their memories regarding purchasing intent are shockingly short. Hopkins understood cognitive load and distraction a century before smartphones even existed.
That's wild.
He notes that mail order advertisers know that readers forget. Picture this scenario. You are sitting in your armchair reading a magazine. You might be deeply absorbed in a fascinating editorial piece. You turn the page and see an ad for a product you genuinely want or need.
Okay, I'm with you.
You read the small type, you are convinced, and you make a firm, conscious decision, I'm going to send a check for that tomorrow. Hopkins states that a large percentage of people will forget that firm decision within 5 minutes.
5 minutes. It sounds absurd, but it's completely true.
Right.
You turn the page to finish the story you were reading, the dog barks, the phone rings, someone knocks on the front door, and that entire mental intent to purchase just evaporates.
Completely gone.
The chemical desire in your brain dissipates, and the sale is lost forever. Not because they didn't want it, but because life intervened.
And the mail order advertiser refuses to accept that waste. They refuse to let a ringing telephone cost them a hard-earned acquisition. So they insert the coupon.
Oh.
The coupon acts as a physical, tangible anchor in reality. The physical act of stopping your reading, finding a pair of scissors, cutting the coupon out of the page, and putting it in your pocket or on your desk completely changes the psychology of the interaction.
It bridges the gap.
Yes, it bridges the gap between the ephemeral moment of desire and the physical act of purchasing. It saves your intent before your brain can discard it.
The practical takeaway here is monumental. First, you cannot sacrifice profitability for aesthetics. Your words need to earn their keep on the page or the screen. And second, you must always give your customer a coupon.
Whatever that looks like today.
Right. In today's digital landscape, that might literally be a discount code, but conceptually, it means providing an immediate, frictionless way to trap their intent. It's a bold add to cart button, an instant one-click checkout, an email capture form right next to the value proposition, or even a simple save for later bookmark. You have to capture their momentum right at the apex of their desire before they switch tabs or look at a text message.
Absolutely. And this ruthless economy of space, this absolute insistence that every single pixel must pull its weight, naturally leads to a question about imagery.
Oh, yeah.
If space is so wildly expensive and small type converts so well, shouldn't we just banish pictures altogether?
Right. Why pay for the picture?
Well, Hopkins says no. It doesn't mean ads shouldn't have pictures. It just means the pictures have to work just as hard as the words, if not harder.
Which brings us to the exact role of imagery. If you're paying thousands of dollars for the physical space a picture occupies, that picture better be actively closing the deal.
Hopkins establishes a very clear hierarchy here. Pictures in mail order are salesmen themselves. They must earn the space they occupy, and their size is strictly and mathematically gauged by their importance to the sale.
Okay, give me an example.
He provides a great contrast. If you are selling a dress or an item of fashion by mail, the picture is incredibly important. The style, the drape of the fabric, the cut, that visual representation is the primary selling argument.
You can't really explain a dress in text alone.
Exactly. So in that case, the picture of the dress might justifiably occupy a massive portion of the space. But for less important, purely practical items, say a wrench or a basic kitchen tool, the pictures are relegated to much smaller spaces.
Got it. And this philosophy sets up what is arguably the most memorable and illustrative anecdote in the entire chapter.
Oh, yes.
It perfectly captures the tension between data-driven reality and the whims of human creativity. So let's talk about the incubator.
It is a phenomenal case study in the danger of artistic whimsy. Hopkins tells the story of an advertiser who sold an incubator by mail. This man had a highly functioning type-based ad. It had the right headlines, it communicated the offer clearly, and the track returns proved it was bringing in excellent, profitable results.
So he's winning the game. He has his mailroom keys set up, his tracking is dialed in, and the money is flowing. He has a machine that turns a small amount of money into a larger amount of money.
Exactly. But then human nature and the urge to tinker kicks in.
It always does.
The advertiser conceived the idea that a striking picture would increase his returns even further. He felt the ad was perhaps too dense, too boring to look at. He wanted it to pop off the page.
To make it pop. The classic marketing request.
Yes. So he made a decision to increase the physical space of his ad by 50%, solely to add a decorative row of chickens in silhouette across the layout.
Wait, here's where it gets really interesting. I genuinely try to visualize the thought process of this entrepreneur. He's looking at his perfectly profitable, dense, text-heavy ad, and he thinks, you know what this well-oiled sales machine is missing? Silhouette chickens.
That's exactly what he thought.
That aesthetic flair is really going to push the consumer over the edge. I mean, it's incredibly funny in hindsight, but it's a trap almost every modern marketer has fallen into. We want to decorate our success. We want our assets to look cooler. So what was the actual fallout of the chicken experiment?
Well, Hopkins provides the exact mathematical verdict. The ad certainly was more striking, it looked better, but because he increased the size of the ad by 50% to accommodate the artwork, his cost per insertion increased by exactly 50%.
Ouch.
And the tracked returns revealed a brutal truth. The new, more expensive ad brought in not one single added sale.
Not a single extra sale. He increased his budget by half, purely for the aesthetic inclusion of the chickens, and the market handed him absolutely zero return on that investment. He essentially set half of his profit margin on fire for the sake of decoration.
He really did. Hopkins spells out the psychological disconnect that caused this failure. The advertiser failed to understand the mindset of his own buyer. He learned the hard way that incubator buyers are intensely practical people. Think about who buys a mail-order incubator in the 1920s. It's a farmer, a homesteader, or an agricultural business owner. They are looking to hatch eggs efficiently to generate a livelihood.
It's a B2B purchase, basically.
Exactly. They are looking for an attractive, reliable offer. They want to know the egg capacity, the temperature control mechanisms, the fuel efficiency, the warranty, and obviously the price. They are absolutely not looking to be charmed by decorative, abstract pictures of chickens.
It's the ultimate disconnect between the creator's ego, wanting to make something visually appealing, and the buyer's reality, which is purely focused on utility. The whim of adding decoration cost that advertiser dearly.
And the most terrifying aspect of the story is considering what would have happened if he hadn't been using the mail order tracking method.
Oh, man.
If he was just running general brand advertising, he would have looked at the new ad and thought, those chickens look fantastic, and happily paid the 50% higher bill every single month. He would be bleeding capital out of his business for years without ever realizing the chickens were entirely useless.
That is the exact tragedy Hopkins highlights. He says, think of the countless untraced campaigns where a whim of that kind costs half the advertising money without a penny in return. And it may go on year after year.
Year after year.
The practical application of this principle is vital. Every element in your presentation, whether it's an image on a landing page, a graphic in a pitch deck, or a B-roll sequence in a video ad, it must actively drive the sale. It must communicate a specific selling point or demonstrate a benefit.
Absolutely.
If an image is just there for whimsy, if it's placed simply to break up the text or to look pretty, it is a financial liability. It is not an asset.
And if we accept that we can't rely on cute chickens or massive space-wasting fonts to win over the customer, we are left with only one tool: the message itself, the actual words.
Which leads directly to Hopkins' unbending rule about how much you should actually say to the prospect.
It challenges one of the most pervasive myths in modern communication.
The idea that people don't read.
Exactly. It challenges the massive misconception that people don't read long copy. Hopkins states the foundational motto of mail-order advertising unequivocally: the more you tell, the more you sell.
The more you tell, the more you sell. In our current ecosystem where we are constantly told to keep it short, make it snackable, and people have the attention span of a goldfish, this advice feels almost contrarian.
Yeah.
Like we are terrified of boring the audience.
But the fear of boring the audience stems from a misunderstanding of intent. Hopkins grounds his advice in the core premise of his entire philosophy. Advertising is salesmanship in print.
Right.
If your goal is to secure an immediate sale, there is no artificial limitation on the amount of copy you should use. Imagine a highly qualified prospect standing in front of you in a showroom. They are genuinely interested in buying your high-ticket product. You are answering their questions, explaining the features, overcoming their objections. You wouldn't arbitrarily stop talking after 50 words and walk away just to be brief.
No, you'd sound crazy.
You would tell them every single relevant fact, every hidden benefit, and every technical detail they need to feel confident enough to make a purchasing decision right then and there.
That makes perfect sense. If I'm researching a new car or an expensive piece of software, I want all the details. I don't want a snappy 5-word slogan. I want the complete manual before I hand over my credit card.
Exactly. Hopkins notes that whether you use a small ad or a large ad, it has to tell a reasonable, complete story.
Right.
But he also issues a massive warning about scaling up. He says an ad that is twice as large will bring twice the returns, and sometimes a bit more, but only if that larger space is utilized just as efficiently as the small space.
You can't just take a half page of copy, blow the font up to size 48 to fill a full page, and expect double the sales. As we discussed, that's just paying double for the same real estate.
To justify the larger space, you have to fill it with more salesmanship, more facts, more testimonials, a more complete and compelling story. And to prove just how rigid, scientific, and unchanging these perfected principles are, Hopkins introduces the case study of the Mead Cycle Company.
Oh, I was reading the Mead Cycle Company example, and it completely shifted my perspective on campaign longevity. What was Mr. Mead doing that was so extraordinary?
Well, the Mead Cycle Company was a highly successful mail-order business selling bicycles directly to consumers. Hopkins points out that their ads ran for many years, and they were completely unchanging.
Unchanging for years.
Yes. They were dense, they used incredibly small type, they maintained a strict economy of space, and they utilized the exact same specific headlines and pictures year after year. Hopkins personally spoke to Mr. Mead, and Mead told him that he would not change a single word in his core ads for $10,000.
$10,000. In the early 1900s, that was a staggering sum of money. My initial thought was that he was just a stubborn founder who was set in his ways. But looking at the math, it was the exact opposite of stubbornness.
Yeah.
It was pure submission to the data.
Exactly. Mr. Mead wouldn't change the ad because those specific paragraphs of text were the final, perfected result of endless, grueling experiments.
Right.
For years, he had compared one ad against another, utilizing the key tracking system we discussed earlier. He traced the returns down to the penny, he tested headlines, he tested guarantees, he tested the sizing of the bicycle images.
He tested everything.
Everything. And the ad that was currently running was the undisputed, mathematically proven champion. It was as near perfect for its purpose as an ad could be in that market.
This is where we have to look in the mirror. I mean, think about the modern corporate compulsion to constantly refresh or rebrand.
Oh, the constant rebranding.
Think about the last time you or your team had a highly successful strategy. Maybe it was an email template that always booked meetings, or a cold calling script that worked, or a landing page that converted at a really high rate, and you just stopped using it, or you completely overhauled it simply because you wanted something fresh. You felt it was getting stale.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, that is the exact trap Hopkins is warning against. We change things because the creator gets bored. The executive gets bored looking at the same collateral.
Yes.
The marketing agency wants to pitch a new concept to justify their retainer, or the creative director wants to win a new design award. But Hopkins implies that Mr. Mead understood a fundamental secret of scale. The customer isn't bored.
Because every single day, a completely new set of eyes sees that ad for the very first time. To the prospect, it is brand new.
The ad is a perfected machine. Tinkering with a finely tuned, mathematically validated machine just to gratify your own internal desire for novelty is a terrible, costly business decision. Hopkins calls this phenomenon the compromise of pride.
The compromise of pride. He acknowledges that human nature dictates we want our output to look fancy. We want our peers in the industry to think we are sophisticated.
Right, we want to look good.
We want our competitors to be jealous of our beautiful campaigns.
And he is actually quite pragmatic about it. He's not stating that you can never have a beautiful, architecturally stunning corporate office, or that a massive, profitable conglomerate can never run a purely aesthetic brand awareness campaign.
Right.
He concedes that there is some apology for that most successful businesses can afford to do something for pride and public opinion. But his ultimate demand, the core thesis of this section, is this. Let us know what we are doing. Let us know the cost of our pride.
Know the cost of your pride. It's a brutal challenge. If you are going to run a massive, beautiful, empty ad with lots of white space, abstract imagery, and absolutely no tracking mechanism or coupon, Hopkins is essentially saying, fine, do it.
But you have to track it.
But you better sit down and calculate exactly how many tens of thousands of dollars you are sacrificing in lost acquisitions by doing it that way. You need to explicitly acknowledge on your balance sheet that you are spending that money just to make yourself and your board feel prestigious. It's a mirror held up to the vanity of modern business.
Which brings us perfectly to the ultimate synthesis of this entire chapter. What is the grand unifying lesson of all these strict rules?
So what does this all mean? When we pull back and look at the entire landscape of Chapter 4, tracking every single penny via mailroom keys, eliminating decorative borders, firing the 50% more expensive silhouette chickens, writing long, exhaustive copy, and refusing to change a winning formula even if you are bored of it, how do we tie all these rigid mathematical rules into one profound philosophy?
Well, the soul of Chapter 4 is that the mail order environment is the ultimate court of last resort. What Hopkins is fundamentally doing is executing a systematic removal of the human ego from the equation of business communication.
Removing the ego entirely.
Yes. All of the mechanics we've discussed point to one undeniable, memorable insight. The market is a master that cannot be fooled. You can spin a narrative to your board of directors, you can lie to your agency, you can lie to yourself about how brilliant and cutting edge your new marketing campaign is.
You can build the most beautiful snowman.
Exactly. But the market simply looks at the offer, evaluates the clarity of your complete story, and either physically hands over the money or walks away.
The market is a master that cannot be fooled. It strips away all the corporate delusions. But, Hopkins doesn't just leave us with that heavy realization. He gives us a massive safety net.
Mm-hmm.
He says that if you do choose to build those fine offices, or if you design those beautiful but wasteful campaigns out of pride, and your business suddenly fails to bring the wanted returns, you have a fail-safe to fall back on.
He provides the ultimate reset button. He says, let us go back to our model, a good mail order ad, and eliminate some of our waste.
When the macroeconomic times get tough, or when the aesthetic fluff stops working, or when the venture capital dries up, you return to the court of last resort.
You return to the brutal math.
You eliminate the white space, you tell the complete story, and you make the ad a door-to-door salesperson again. That is an incredibly grounding principle. It gives you a bedrock foundation to return to whenever you feel lost in the weeds of modern marketing theory.
It really does.
Before we wrap up, let's explore a final thought that builds on what we've discussed today, but pushes it directly into our current reality.
Consider this paradox. Hopkins wrote these principles at a time when tracking a single physical coupon via a P.O. box was considered a revolutionary, painstaking act of business science.
Right. It was hard work.
It took immense physical effort to gather the data. Today, we live in the absolute opposite environment. We are completely drowning in data.
Limitless data.
Limitless clicks, impressions, heat maps, bounce rates, and endless automated analytics dashboards tracking every micro interaction. But the provocative question is this. Does this endless flood of digital data actually make us as disciplined and rigorous as those early mail order pioneers? Or have we simply found more sophisticated digital ways to justify our whims?
Oh, that's a good question.
Are you using your data to relentlessly hunt down the modern equivalent of the 41-cent reply? Or are you just using vanity metrics like impressions, views, and social media likes to build better, more expensive silhouette chickens?
That is the exact question every creator and executive needs to ask themselves. Are we using the dashboard to find the uncomfortable truth? Or are we using it to build a highly optimized snowman that will just melt in the sun anyway? It all loops back to that initial tension. Are you throwing darts in the dark and calling every thud a bullseye? Or are you brave enough to turn on the harsh lights and see exactly where you stand?
It's the severest test.
It is. Because once you accept the brutal math required to actually close the sale, you face a new problem. You have to figure out how to get the distracted prospect to actually stop and read that dense perfected pitch in the first place. Now that we know the brutal math required to close the sale, next time we'll look at the gatekeeper to your entire message. The single line of text that decides whether your ideal customer stops to listen or walks away forever. We're diving into Chapter 5, Headlines.
What you just listened was the beginning of a full audio, way longer, explaining every single chapter of the book. If you would like to keep listening to the end and access to the full audio, you can access it with the link down below in the description and in the pinned comment.